Okay, I think we're all good to go. Random bots, of course, appearing in the kick chat. Boy, they sure do not like to give up. Really wish they would. I'm never buying anything that they're offering. All right. We are back with more 40k lore, picking up to where we left off. Now in the Galaxy in Flames, the Battle of Fall, Horus Heresy, Warhammer 40k lore. All by Wizards and Warriors. They really animate this stuff well.
With the Battle of Isstvan V over and the Loyalist forces scattered, the traitors had a clear advantage. But the galaxy was enormous with millions of stars. One giant traitor army could not possibly conquer or hold all of it. An expansion of influence was needed before an assault on Terra was possible. Without stable supply lines, secured flanks, and amassed experimental or xeno weaponry, the Horus Heresy would surely fail. None of this deterred the traitors, who were undaunted in their mission to take control of the galaxy. Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 6th video in our history of the 40k universe, we will explore how Horus seized important parts of the galaxy leading up to the crucial Battle of Fall. And the present-day 40k universe needs just as much exploring as its history, which is where you come in with the sponsor of this video, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. At last, a fully-fledged CRPG in the 40k universe has emerged. From the developers of Pathfinder, this game puts you at the head of a company of rogue traders, privateers sanctioned by the Emperor to act with special powers in their exploration and defense of distant frontiers. Gather a crew of special operators, be they human, space marine, or even tolerable Xenos, to aid in your battles against anyone that either stands in the way of mankind's empire or of your own growing business enterprise. Travel on your own personal void ship and take control of resource-rich planets to expand your power, make impactful decisions to shape the fate of these regions, and use the special abilities of the elite team you build to eliminate the powerful threats that lurk on the edge of civilization. None more so, of course, than the forces of chaos. As well as the in-game companions you'll be gathering, bring real-life ones too, with up to 6-player online co-op. The game is out on Steam, PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X. Links in the description. So get out there and live in the Warhammer 40k world as only a rogue trader can. After 3 Loyalist legions were destroyed on the surface of Isstvan V, the traitors took the initiative. It would take time for the news of the drop site massacre to spread. Using this narrow time window, the traitors split up into dozens of smaller fleets to conquer as many unsuspecting planets as possible. With their forces so scattered, a counter-offensive from Terra would be deadly. The Loyalist fleet there would surely have to go through the Paramar star system, a major supply hub in that part of the galaxy. That crucial system was heavily fortified by the Mechanicum loyal to the Emperor, protecting hive worlds and mining stations, but most importantly, the Forge world Paramar 5, which was full of military equipment and supplies. Horus decided to capture this planet as soon as possible, sending half of the Alpha Legion with extensive Dark Mechanicum support. The traitors exited the Immaterium outside the planetary ring and prepared a trap. All incoming ships were intercepted, and their crew were replaced with Alpha Legion infiltrators. 38 days after the drop site massacre, the Alpha Legion started their offensive.
It's kind of weird. As incapable as Horus was as a war master, suddenly he gets chaosed and he's just smarter. Is this because he doesn't mind every dirty trick in the book now? So he can just kind of do it?
5 traitor ships emerged from the warp, posing as loyalists, and requested supplies. Everything went according to plan, until a small fleet of Iron Warriors emerged from the warp. Even though they were part of the Traitor Legion, they had no clue about the ongoing civil war. For years they had been fighting Xenos, and after ending their mission, they had returned to Paramar to resupply. The Alpha Legion, seeing unexpected reinforcements, revealed too much through the Vox radio, blowing their cover. Subsequently, the Iron Warriors opened fire on the traitors and informed the planet about the incoming attack. The traitor fleet was shred to pieces, but all of the planetary and orbital defenses were turned off by the infiltrators. More Alpha Legion and Dark Mechanicum ships emerged from the star system's outer regions. The Iron Warriors' fleet was outmatched and started to avoid direct combat, taking the battle to the surface. The traitors shuttled 18,000 Alpha Legion Space Marines, 50 Titans, and thousands of tanks, hoping to overwhelm the defenders before the supply stores were exhausted. The Loyalists mustered 3,000 Iron Warriors, 25 Titans, armoured support, and several thousand cybernetically augmented Mechanicum infantry. Both sides deployed their Titans on a flat desert. The Titans, upon reaching firing distance, turned their surroundings into hellfire. None could hope to survive between these horrifying wonders of technology. Dust clouds from gunfire and collapsing machines covered the battlefield for hours. Alpha Legion launched a sneak attack through these clouds, capturing most of the spaceport. However, the Loyalists didn't sit idly during this attack. With armoured support, the Iron Warriors launched their own offensive, exhausting the traitor forces. 3 hours into the battle, the Iron Warriors, without any tanks left, decided to withdraw, as victory was deemed unattainable. 2 hours later, the battle ended in a traitor victory, although not as smooth as was planned. With Paramar 5 captured, the scattered traitor forces could continue their offensive. As their sphere of influence grew, so did the news of the Horus Heresy. Throughout the entire galaxy, few knew how to react. The majority of humanity remained loyal to the Emperor, while some pragmatic souls remembered that Horus was against taxation and sided with the traitors for that reason. Others saw Horus's rebellion as an opportunity to free themselves from the Empire and become independent nations. Many planets wished to remain neutral and not engage in any war, but their dreams were often shattered when armies from either side burned their world. With so many choices, the population of individual planets often couldn't agree with the decision of the planetary governor, which consequently sparked rebellions. This happened especially often when trade stopped on any given planet due to the raging war. Additionally, Xenos, seeing the weakness of the Imperium, started a counter-offensive against humanity on all possible fronts. The traitor fleets used this wavering stability to expand rapidly. In the hundreds of skirmishes that followed, another player arose, the Black Shields, Space Marines of the splinter fleets of the traitor legions. Each one consisted of less than 5,000 Astartes and had been too far away or too busy on other missions to be included in the major campaigns on Istvan. Now they were finding out that their brothers and Primarchs had betrayed the Emperor. Without the warrior lodges and months of convincing by agents of chaos, most of them decided to remain loyal to Terra. Unfortunately, due to their heraldry and sizes, it was impossible to discern them from traitor fleets, and they were attacked by the Loyalists. To end this friendly fire, their heraldry was scrapped, revealing the natural black color of their armor, hence the name Black Shields. Unfortunately, this change was used against them when Horus ordered some of his fleets to imitate Black Shields in order to bypass Loyalist defenses. After that incident, the Black Shields were fired upon from both sides, swaying some to swear loyalty to Horus and others to remain neutral or serve the Empire against invading Xenos. The few remaining Black Shields who were willing to aid Terra helped only as free agents, acting independently to turn the tides and leaving shortly thereafter. With the galaxy burning, billions dying daily, and the cults of the Chaos Gods expanding, the warp became unstable. The warp storms became an increasing issue, slowing or even blocking travel through the Immaterium for Loyalists. The traitors had been given passage through them, but it came at a cost. Instead of being lost in the warp, they directly interacted with pure chaos. Disciplined legions started to transform into hordes of bloodthirsty barbarians. Instead of conquering, they pillaged, sacrificing entire planets to the Chaos Gods. Key strongholds were left without any garrison, as all flocked to the next bloodbath. Even the Iron Warriors, who maintained discipline, started to resent one another, transforming their legion into selfish, achievement-hoarding individuals capable of killing their own to get the credit for victory. Soon, Psykers once again bolstered their ranks, and with them, demon possessions and mutations followed. The traitor Space Marine gene seed became so unstable that all new Space Marines were mutated from the beginning of their life. Even the Primarchs started changing. Some had their ideals warped, while others showed signs of madness. This degeneration led them to be seen as power-hungry tyrants, rather than the universally admired demigods they had once been. All of these factors combined lowered traitor combat effectiveness. After all, a war waged by emotions can't compete with cold calculations, and a mindless charge will always break on carefully laid out fortifications. The first battle affected by Chaos influence was the Battle of Full.
Holy crap. And all this could have been avoided if the Emperor just sat his sons down and explained to them what his overall agenda was when it came to battling chaos instead of keeping it a secret. Oh boy.
On the plains of Istvan V, one more loyalist army remained, the Retribution Fleet of the Iron Fists. This army originally was composed of 561 ships, and while on the way to Istvan V was caught in a warp storm and severely damaged. A third of the fleet was destroyed in this tempest, leaving 363 operational vessels. To make matters worse, their commander had died. Additionally, the storm forced them to stay in the Full system. The newly appointed commander, Alexis Pollux, thought that their predicament was a trap laid by Horus, and decided to drill his army in preparation for the incoming traitor forces. After almost half a year of drilling, his forces were perfectly ready for any incoming threat. When the traitors came in the form of the Iron Warriors, under the command of the Primarch Perturabo, they saw a spherical formation of loyalist ships there to greet them. The attacking fleet of 400 ships formed a cone, a 3D wedge, with the heaviest battleships and battle barges in the front. In the initial 4 minutes of the battle, over 70 loyalist ships were destroyed or severely damaged. Upon inflicting such heavy losses, and finding out that the fleet wasn't commanded by Sigismund, the Imperial Fist second-in-command, Perturabo lost interest in the battle and ordered his fleet to end it as fast as possible. The vanguard of the traitor fleet started to break formation, chasing deep into the sphere. Everything up to this point was part of the Loyalist defensive strategy. The Iron Warriors chased too deep and were attacked from below, above, and the sides. Every Loyalist ship knew how to proceed in this situation after extensive drilling. The sphere enveloped the wedge. The Loyalists started tearing apart the traitor formation after destroying the lone chasing heavy ships. Consequently, the outer layers were forced to leave formation, while being attacked from all sides, and if any ship showed even a hint of assuming leadership, it was immediately boarded. The only one capable of turning the tides was the Primarch Perturabo, but he wasn't watching the battle. His soldiers were scared to relay this information to him, for in his anger he would surely kill the messenger. Eventually, someone mustered the courage and died giving the message. But it was too late. The traitors had barely any reserves to turn the tides of battle. To make matters worse, their flagship was exposed, and a strike force of 50 ships was heading there to kill Perturabo. With the battle being one step away from being won by the Loyalists, the Chaos Gods intervened. Rogel Dawn had been sending messages for the Retribution fleet to return to Terra for months.
Rogel Dawn. Not to be honest, but he doesn't seem very capable. I feel like it should have been Gilliman. Roberto Gilliman. Ultramarines, I don't know. Just feels like Gilliman would have done a little bit better job as Supreme Commander.
But all of these messages were lost in the warp. The Chaos Gods allowed one of these messages to pierce the warp storm and opened a corridor inside the Immaterium to allow the Loyalists to escape from the battle. This was catastrophic. To leave the battle meant that most of the ships had to be left behind. Larger ships, those encircling the back of the traitors, and the strike fleet sent to kill Perturabo had no chance to escape a battle on the brink of being won. Yet their Primarch had given the order. so the Iron Fist started their costly retreat. With barely any cohesion, the Loyalists became easy prey. The only saving grace was the strike group. Instead of retreating, it attacked relentlessly, managing to board the Iron Warriors' flagship with 1,300 Space Marines. This overwhelming force breached all defense lines, reaching the Primarch. In the brutal melee combat, all Loyalists died, but not before killing all of Perturabo's personal guards. Less than 100 ships escaped from Phul, and half of them were scattered inside the Warp Storm. Even though this was a traitor victory, it was a Pyrrhic one, with the Iron Warriors swearing rivalry to the Iron Fists, hoping to settle the score in a fair engagement. Following the battle, Perturabo became so disappointed with his sons that he replaced his personal guard with robots that had been forbidden to use since the Dark Age of technology. Even though the traitors were achieving dozens of victories, many others were causing some negative backlash for the cause. One mission in particular had been too important for Horus to delegate to anyone. The Coronate Deeps region was full of forge worlds and mining worlds. If these 5-star sectors were captured by traitors, it would fuel their entire war effort. To that end, at the end of 006 M30, Horus took elements of 5 legions, the Sons of Horus, Iron Warriors, Death Guard, Alpha Legion, and Night Lords, to take control of this region. Their onslaught was heralded by a single message: "Bow before him who is the War Master. Abase yourself before this truth. Serve those who serve him. Hearken only to their words. The Imperium is his. Mankind is his. You are his. Submit to the War Master or die by his hand. There is no other choice. You will be given the chance to kneel but once. Horus is Lord. Horus is death." In the opening stage of what is now called the Manichaean War, traitors were waiting on the edges of the Coronate Deeps, raising panic amongst the populace. Stories of destroyed patrols, strike groups, and solitary planets being conquered in a mere 9 hours all took their toll on public morale. Civilians started fleeing, only to discover drifting hulls filled with corpses of people who had had the same idea. Horus's message was true: die or serve him. There was no escape. Presented with that choice, Worlds started rebelling. A defense force that consisted of hundreds of spaceships and 4 million solar auxilia, the best of normal humans in the army, was now forced to pacify rebellions while getting harassed by traitors. The first star sector to fall was the Cyclops cluster, when a Dark Mechanicum emissary swayed Mapandex, one of the 2 Forge worlds, to join the side of Horus. The other one, Mazoa, was blockaded and starved from all resources. To capture the rest of the planets in the Cyclops cluster, Horus sent the Death Guard, led by Mortarion. Their first 2 merciless attacks were preceded by virus bombardment. Entire planets, just like Isfahan III, were stripped of all living beings. This tactic of terror caused more worlds to surrender to Horus. By now, news had spread all around the sector, and reinforcements in the form of splinter Space Marine fleets arrived, one of which was Black Shield. While the battles in the Cyclops cluster were finishing, Alpha Legion infiltrated the capital sector of Manichaea and instigated additional rebellions of civilians and Mechanicum. Additionally, the traitors lured an Orc army to spread out the Loyalists further. In the moment of absolute chaos, Horus descended with all the might of his forces, swiftly conquering the world of Manichaea and Port Moor, as well as obliterating the armada of the Imperial fleet. Having accomplished all these goals, Horus left with most of his forces, leaving less than 20,000 Space Marines to finish the defenders, a task they couldn't accomplish until 008 M30. Even though traitors took control over Coronate Deeps, it was considered a stalemate. Billions of potential workers died, not allowing them to unleash the full potential of production. Splinter Fleet harassment slowed it even harder, but most importantly, the Forge world Mazoa remained in the Loyalists' hands, although blockaded. With the galaxy consumed by war and billions dying, who would emerge victorious? The traitors had a clear advantage, as at this point they had lost only around 100,000 Astartes compared to the 400,000 on the Loyalist side. The future of the Imperium now depended on the...
You gotta be honest, it's because they have no holds barred. They use everything. While the other side, The Imperium is restricted because they're not psychopathic murderers. Well, at least you would think not, but they've had their moments.
Separated Loyalist legions. In the next episode, we will explore their whereabouts. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely.
This is what we want to see. If they're going to make a Warhammer series for 40k, I would love to see them do it based on the Horus Heresy first, as the opening prelude. Honestly, that would work the best.
Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one. The galaxy was on fire. Loyalists were losing ground on all fronts. For now, Terra was secure behind the Beta Garmin Fortress system, but if the offensive of Horus continued apace, then Terra would soon be left alone and vulnerable. Yet there was still hope. 5 Loyalist legions were scattered among the stars. If those armies reached Terra, then humanity's home planet would become an unassailable fortress against Horus's crusade. Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 7th video, we will explore the fate of the separated legions. When the news of the Dropsite massacre reached Terra, Lord Commander Dawn started sending recall signals to all his forces. He needed every single man for the upcoming defense of Terra. The first major force to receive this message was the Retribution fleet in the Fall system. Alexis Pollux answered this call to arms, which cost him victory and saved the life of the traitor Primarch Perturabo. The Retribution fleet was subsequently scattered inside the raging warp storms, with less than 50 ships reaching Terra, less than 10% of their original strength. The second legion to receive the recall signal was the Dark Angels. Their Primarch, Lionel Johnson, had ambitions to become the next War Master after the Horus Heresy ended. He saw this war as a mere power struggle within the Imperium, instead of a colossal invasion of chaos, capable of destroying everything the Emperor had built in the last 200 years. From his point of view, submitting to the authority of Dawn would deny him the title of War Master. Thus, Lion ignored the recall to Terra, instead spending the next 3 years managing to accumulate victories in several skirmishes against heretic forces. More importantly, he found a Xeno device capable of traversing inside the warp storms. The other half of El Johnson's legion was under the command of Luther, the adoptive father of Lion from a time prior to the reunification with the Emperor. Luther and several other Dark Angels were sent back to their homeworld Caliban after disappointing Lion.
Sheesh.
For 60 years, their Primarch
Arrogance
did not
befalls
contact them
all,
even
it
once,
appears.
nor claim any recruits, only using Caliban as a place to dump exiled Space Marines. After learning of the Horus Heresy, Luther put his forces on high alert and awaited a recall order from Lion, an order which never came. The current War Master had not been sitting idly while the Loyalist forces regrouped. In 007 M31, he created a counterfeit signal. In it, he claimed the Space Wolves betrayed the Emperor by killing Magnus the Red and the Legion of Thousand Suns, and by destroying their homeworld Prospero. This signal was meant to provoke Jagatai Khan with his Legion of White Scars to attack the Space Wolves. Jagatai had spent the last 6 years chasing the surviving orcs from the Ulanor system to prevent them from forming another war. In their chase, they ended up in the Chondak system,
didn't have
where orc
leave
layers
the
were
orcs
spread
be.
among multiple
He did have a
planets.
force chasing them.
The extermination of the Xenos was painstakingly methodical and slow. White Scar's efforts were further slowed down by a secret artifact that blocked communication with the rest of the galaxy, cutting them from reinforcements and supplies. While the cleansing of the system was coming to an end in 007 M31, almost the entirety of the Alpha Legion arrived. The newly arrived forces split in half, each one commanded by one of the twin Primarchs. The first group, under the command of Alfarius, took all of the battleships and blockaded the Space Wolves in the nearby Alaxes Nebula. The second one, under the command of Omegon, went to the Chondax system to recruit the White Scars. However, Omegon wasn't loyal to Horus, only begrudgingly following the commands of his twin Alpharius. Instead of following orders, Omegon destroyed the Zeno communication blocking device and allowed the Message of Dawn to reach the White Scars at the exact moment as the counterfeit signal of Horus and distress signal from the Space Wolves came. Impulsively, Jagatai Khan rushed to slaughter the Space Wolves for killing Magnus, but was stopped by Omegon's newly formed blockade. Omegon's forces weren't strong enough to stop the entire fleet of the White Scars, so he created an illusion. Large transport vessels were disguised as battleships and used as a deterrent, discouraging any attempt at a breakthrough. Meanwhile, in the Alaxes Nebula, the exhausted Space Wolves probed the blockade. The Loyalist attack didn't have enough momentum to breach the blockade by force. Consequently, Leman Russ, the Space Wolves' Primarch, took a risky gambit. He lowered the shields on his flagship, hoping for Alpharius to teleport on board to end the conflict with an honorable duel. Instead, the capital ship was fired upon, suffering heavy damage in its withdrawal.
Whoa.
After this, the Space Wolves had no other choice than to venture deep into the Alaxes Nebula, a giant red gas cloud which was highly corrosive and capable of dissolving entire battleships in just a few hours. Inside the nebula was an ever-changing labyrinth of paths, big enough to enter but small enough that standard fleet formations were impossible to create. 2/3 of Alpharius' fleet chased the Loyalists, while the rest circled around the nebula to block the exit on the other side. This chase took weeks, with both sides losing escort ships to the unpredictability of the space anomaly. In the meantime, Jagatai Khan correctly deduced that the Alpha Legion alone wouldn't be enough to stop 2 entire legions, and knowing that Leman Russ was impatient and always rushed headfirst into battle, the Alpha Legion forces in Chondax must have been only strong on paper. The White Scars frigates probed the blockade but swiftly retreated. Khan then noticed where the Alpha Legion fleet started chasing the retreating frigates and executed a feigned retreat maneuver. The White Scars fleet, modified to be even faster, quickly created a hole in the blockade, one which transport ships disguised as battleships couldn't mend. Now free, Khan decided against going to the Alaxes Nebula. Instead, he went to Prospero in search of the truth, to see if the Space Wolves had truly killed his dear brother Magnus, postponing his decision to choose a side. However, Khan didn't escape Chondax with his entire legion. Smaller fleets on the other planets in the system were unable to escape, and all were destroyed, about 6,000 Space Marines in total, further distancing Khan from the traitors. The Space Wolves, now without any hope of rescue, attempted another breakthrough, this time led by second-in-command Gunnar Gunhilt as Leman Russ stayed behind, providing covering fire from his damaged flagship. Their attack focused on the forward frigates, sending boarding teams to capture them. Gunnar hoped for Alpharius' battleships to close the distance, as most of the guns were on the sides of the Imperial ships, and the tight tunnels of the Alaxes Nebula didn't allow long-range broadside combat. Yet, contrary to the Space Wolves' expectations, the Alpha Legion sacrificed their frigates and did not close the gap. The Space Wolves were now left without their boarding torpedoes and dropships, with the Astartes spread thin.
The Loyalists are getting their butts kicked. Like, from start, I don't know about the end, but from the start, Horus was doing terrible as a good guy. But the moment he became bad, suddenly he got super clever and super smart and cunning. That's an amazing turnaround. I mean, I understand 4 Chaos Gods were inside of him, but, like, that's a crazy turnaround to get that intelligent that fast.
Thin among many ships. To make matters worse, they would have to repeat this maneuver again if they wanted to break free. Yet now it would be exponentially harder, as they would be fighting against battleships, not frigates. Gunnar decided to retreat, and as the ships were turning in the tight space, Alpharius counterattacked, destroying over 30 frigates and damaging all other ships. The Space Wolves' prospects of survival were now extremely grim. They would all be dead in a matter of days, as many of their ships had damaged engines, being slower than the Alpha Legion ones. With all hope seemingly lost, the Space Wolves had 2 paths left to them. One was to leave the nebula and die in honorable combat, and 2 was to venture deep into the center of the gas cloud and die slowly. Leman Russ decided to go deeper. Gunnar, however, refused to follow orders, for he wanted to die as a warrior. The Primarch honoured his wish, leaving him as a rearguard. Gunnar died, but not before destroying several frigates and ramming one of the traitor battleships out of the tunnel, melting them both entirely.
Seemed more like kamikaze
The rest
than
of the
dying
Space
with honor.
Wolves reached an enormous cavity inside the gas cloud, revealing that the Alaxes Nebula was hollow. Soon the Alpha Legion caught up, formed up, and started exterminating the Loyalists. When Leman's ship's void shields were destroyed, Alfarius teleported on board to show his dominance over Rus. However, before the two traded even a single blow, something unexpected happened. A giant space fort and a new Loyalist fleet showed up on the scene. Luther's Dark Angels had been using the Alaxes Nebula as a secret base, and, after making sure that Leman Russ was a Loyalist, aided him. Alpha Legion tried to fight back, but with a third of Alfarius' fleet outside of the nebula, and most of the escorts with Omegon, it was clear that they had no chance to win. The traitors retreated, losing dozens of ships while trying to squeeze through a small tunnel. After the battle ended, the Space Wolves fleet remained there for repairs, which would take at least a few years. Before long, Jagatai Khan had reached Prospero, now a dead world with an atmosphere so full of ashes that the surface couldn't be seen. Khan descended to the surface, looking for the body of Magnus. Every building and road was destroyed, and gaping holes reached the depths of sewers and catacombs, while the local fauna had been turned into ghosts. Eventually, Khan found what he was looking for, a living Magnus. The Thousand Sons Primarch told Khan of his folly, of how he sold his soul to the Chaos Gods, but how the transaction had not gone smoothly. When Sinch, the Chaos God of Change, was saving Magnus and the surviving Thousand Sons, the soul of Magnus shattered. Each aspect of Magnus was now a separate entity, and the Shard Khan was speaking to was deeply regretful of what he had done. Now possessed with the whole story, Khan had to choose whose side he would join. The Emperor was a tyrant who sent Leman Russ to Prospero, while Horus was rebelling against tyranny but was in alliance with Chaos, an unpredictable force that was unfathomably worse than the current regime. Khan chose to be loyal, ending the suffering of the Magnus Shard. Meanwhile, from orbit, the warrior lodges made their move when the traitor White Scars started a fight to control the fleet, so that when Jagatai returned, he would find his army ready to join the Warmaster, forcing him to join the side of the heretics. While the battle on board the spaceships was happening, the Death Guard returned from the Manichaean War with 4 battleships, a fleet smaller than the one of the White Scars. Mortarion descended to the surface, trying to recruit Khan one last time. The negotiations ended with a duel. The speed of Khan was met with the slow but unstoppable onslaught of Mortarion. The fight ended inconclusively when Mortarion became absolutely sure that recruiting Jagatai was impossible, returning to orbit to save his fleet from destruction. Moments later, when Khan teleported to his ship, he was met with the horrible sight of infighting. The bloodshed was stopped when the Primarch executed the leader of the traitors. However, now in his legion were several thousand traitors who were split into 2 groups. First were traitors to the core, who escaped during the brief skirmish with the Death Guard. The other group wanted to join Horus, but their loyalty lay first and foremost with their Primarch, and they were ready to face the just punishment. Khan decided against killing.
I think Khan brought that on himself by being indecisive. He wanted information first, but he was so slow at trying to get it. It brought on problems.
His soldiers, but couldn't trust them fully. Wisely, he sent them on a nearly suicidal mission to disrupt the back lines of the traitors, joining the survivors of Istvan V in their guerrilla warfare. The White Scars, now only about 50,000 strong, engaged in hit-and-run warfare with Mortarion and his fleet. Although this campaign lasted 4 years, it was inconclusive, only exhausting forces on both sides. Meanwhile, oblivious to this entire conflict, Sanguinius arrived in the Cygnus cluster in 006 M31 with the entirety of his legion of Blood Angels. His forces amounted to 120,000 Space Marines in total, supplemented by traitor word-bearers guides. This system, according to Horus, was supposedly enslaved by Xenos. However, all scans showed no living life forms. Upon venturing closer to Cygnus Prime, a veil was lifted around the entire star system, severing the system from the galaxy. Soon, impossible phenomena started to occur. On the surface of one planet, lava rivers formed the 8-pointed star, the symbol of chaos. Another planet seemed to be sentient, launching rocks from volcanoes to attack the Blood Angels' fleet. During their travel, they had seen countless civilian ships full of dead, boneless bodies, finding only 30 survivors welded inside a crashed ship. Among these survivors was an anti-psyker blank, a woman named Niobe. Upon reaching Cygnus Prime, the trap was sprung. Powerful and unrelenting psychic screams filled the minds of all in the fleet. While the Space Marines felt it as a severe headache, the normal humans who operated the fleet were rapidly brought to insanity. Suicides and murders decimated the crew, leaving hundreds of thousands of empty posts, preventing the execution of anything but the simplest ship maneuvers. Then, the demon fleet attacked with one goal in mind: to ram. All local civilian spaceships, now full of demons, grew semi-organic parts, like tendrils or spider legs, helping to bind the ships after the crash. The crippled Blood Angels fleet couldn't destroy them all from a distance. Each time when two ships collided, hundreds of demons boarded the ships. The defensive formation completely fell apart when the traitor word-bearer guides left the formation, leaving the flagship, the Red Tier, vulnerable. When the Primarch left the bridge to fight the intruders, the insanity overwhelmed the Red Tier captain, who decided to ram the flagship into the surface of Cygnus Prime. Sanguinius felt the sudden burst of speed and promptly returned, saving the ship from total destruction, but still crash landing. It was a catastrophe, for the ship wasn't built to be inside the gravity well of planets. The Blood Angels only had a little time before the Red Tier would collapse in on itself. For now, leaving the planet, with hundreds of demonic ramming ships in orbit, wasn't an option, so the Primarch and 30,000 Astartes were left alone on the surface. After reinforcing the hull, the army marched to seek the enemy. Countless demonic hordes of Slanesh and Khorne were spotted around a cathedral made of human bones. The Blood Angels used ranged weapons to mercilessly slaughter the forces of chaos, steadily advancing towards the temple. Sanguinus soon found his path blocked, as the co-leader of the Chaos
Blood Angels are some of the nicest
the greater demon of Khorne, coerced him into a duel. In a bloody airborne fight, the Primarch fell with 2 broken legs. All nearby Astartes rushed to save the life of their beloved leader, but Ka'Bandha killed 500 of them with a single spell. Sanguinius lost consciousness, feeling the loss of so many of his legionnaires at the same time, men he considered to be his sons. Fortunately, more Space Marines came, managing to teleport their Primarch aboard the Red Tier. The Blood Angels vengefully abandoned any tactics and engaged in vicious melee combat, descending into a state known as the Red Thirst. This condition was a gene flaw of the Blood Angels that Horus wanted to exploit in order to make Chaos Berserker Space Marines out of them. The fight rapidly turned into a one-sided slaughter of demons. Only a few Blood Angels managed to resist the Red Thirst. First were the former librarians, who decided to use sorcery from aboard the Red Tier to wake Sanguinius, breaking the Edict of Nicaea to do so. The other group was around the blank Niobe. Using her powers, they traversed the battlefield, gathering a strike group of around 20 Marines and storming the cathedral. Slaughtering endless waves of demons, 5 of them managed to reach the heart of corruption, a command room with Ka'Bandha, Chris, the greater demon of Slanesh, and a mysterious casket with a comatose Blood Angel, who was used to amplify the Red Thirst. The Loyalists would be swiftly killed. However, Sanguinus arrived, killing Ka'Bandha from behind. Yet before he could kill Chris, the demon spoke. It revealed that, on the battlefield, all of his kin were already dead, but the Red Thirst had not ended. In mere moments, infighting would break out, and thousands would die. The only way to cure them was for Sanguinus to step into the casket, becoming a demon prince. The Primarch was ready to sacrifice himself. However, Meros, an apothecary who arrived with Niobe, stepped into the casket in his place. In the process of saving his legion, Meros became a demon known as Red Angel. Chaos's plan to corrupt the Blood Angels had failed completely. The 9th Legion was now battle-hardened, and all survivors were ready to fight against the Red Thirst, having experienced it once already. Sanguinus, for his part, had learned the most.
Good.
He was no longer the heavenly angel flying headfirst into battle to save the lives of his sons. nor was he the Red Angel flying headfirst into battle to sate his bloodthirst. Sanguinus had ascended from the two angels inside to become a supreme warrior in a crusade against arch-traitor Horus. However, the higher the rise, the higher the fall, as in his slumber, Sanguinus discovered an even worse gene flaw existed inside him and his legion, and if a tragedy would befall him now, something black and cold would be unleashed. Soon after the demons lost the battle on the surface, the battle in orbit was also won. The Red Tier returned to space, and Sanguinus ordered the destruction of all planets in the system after every single Blood Angel body was recovered. More than 10,000 corpses were collected.
Wow.
The Cygnus cluster was subsequently declared forever dead. Upon leaving the system in 010M31, the Blood Angels received the recall orders of Dawn. However, Terra's Astronomicon wasn't visible in the warp. Instead, there was a beacon in another part of the galaxy. Why wasn't Terra visible? What happened to the Legion of Ultramarines? Find out in the next episode.
The Ultramarines
Our series
are
on the
on
Warhammer 40k
far
Horus Heresy
outskirts.
will continue.
And honestly, if they had him right now, this probably turned the whole war around. Because Gilliman, he is a very intelligent tactician. Like, that guy knows how to war. I mean, when he resurrected after 10,000 years and became the regent of the Imperium, he quelled so many rebellions instantly. The High Lords, they had no chance.
So make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
Fate of Ultramar, Battle of Calith, or of Kalath.
An empire within the empire. The Ultramar sector was unified and ready to fight against any threat. Yet even the impregnable fortress is vulnerable to foul treachery. The news of the Horus Heresy was first heard only after the Chaos Invasion had begun. Across the 500 worlds, the World Eaters and Wordbearers unleashed their never-ending bloodlust on all who stood in their path. Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 8th video, we will explore the fate of Ultramar from the Battle of Calth to the Battle of Nukeria. We've also got a quick blast from the absolute opposite end of the fantasy spectrum, drifting from the dells and fogs of a rustic world of old legend, in which the quietness in the air could be the dividend of peace or the prelude to an arcane mystery. It's Legend in the Mist, a new tabletop RPG for adventures in a world of rustic fantasy. Think Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time. Between two beautiful books, the creators of
I like Wheel of Time. I do. I really do. That's a good series. Now, Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, I love the books. What I do not like is the movies and, of course, Rings of Power, which has been a gigantic mega failure. I know a lot of people like the movies, but I'm just not a fan of them. I like my shows and series sticking to source material completely. You can drift off and add things in between, but don't go off the source material. I mean, really, when you go off the source material, you're just causing problems.
tabletop smash hit City of Mist bring you new rules and a new setting for an adventure focused on the little guys uncovering the mysteries of the world and becoming changed by their grand adventure. The game develops your characters through arcs as you play, and on the back end gives the MC freedom to resolve issues with quick narrative sweeps or in fine detail, tracking everything about all actors down to their state of mind. And the unique status build-up system means you aren't just hacking away at health bars, you stack statuses to achieve a goal, such as training an animal, convincing an NPC, or banishing an ethereal foe. On their Kickstarter, you can see all the stuff you'll get at various backer levels to enhance the game even further, and it has all the details we don't have time for here. So head on over via our link in the description before the Kickstarter ends on March 7th, and get your ticket to the classical fantasy world of Legend in the Mist. Deceived by the order of Horus, the Ultramarines mustered at the planet Calth and awaited Wordbearer's reinforcements. According to the War Master, an Orc army was incoming. However, this Orc army did not exist, and was in fact a ploy to make the Ultramarines vulnerable to betrayal. In 007 M31, the promised aid arrived. The newly arrived traitors, led by First Captain Cor Phaeron and First Chaplain Erebus, told Robute Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, that Lorgar Aurelian, Wordbearer Primarch, would soon arrive. Before the treachery was revealed, the Loyalists welcomed the fellow Legion with open arms, not expecting any foul play. The Ultramarines were by far the largest Legion, almost tripling the size of other legions. As such, the force they brought to Calth was substantial, consisting of 200,000 Space Marines, 100 Titans, over 1 million infantry from both Imperial Guard and Mechanicum, extensive armored support, and the majority of the fleet.
But the reason it could probably operate was because of Guilliman. That's just how capable he was as a commander. Man, that guy really, he's something. I'll give him that.
All that manpower and artillery was brought to a planet already defended by 500 space defense platforms. The traitors brought 50,000 Space Marines, 130 Titans, 500,000 infantry, who at this point degenerated into Chaos cultists, and the bulk of the Wordbearer's fleet. The traitors deployed their soldiers while pretending to wait for the rest of their army and their Primarch. Suddenly, in a fraction of a second, a Wordbearer's ship rammed a giant orbital shipyard. The explosion gave the traitors an attack signal. Falling debris acted like meteors, bombarding the planet's surface. Scrap code was unleashed on orbital defenses, completely disabling them. With an EMP attack, the Noosphere, Mechanicum communications and the control server were destroyed. On the surface, unsuspecting loyalists trying to regroup with the Wordbearers were shot on sight and decimated. The situation on the ground was bad, but the situation in orbit was worse. Caught unawares, the Ultramarine ships had been powered down for the first 15 minutes of combat. Robute Guilliman was the first to realize that the attackers were the Wordbearers and not the Orcs. He tried calling Lorgar to gain an understanding of what was happening. However, Lorgar was stalling in order to delay the countermeasures. Guilliman remained composed until he realized that this entire operation was planned by the Ultramarines, and that one of either Horus or Lorgar was involved. Enraged, he sent a looped signal in which he proclaimed that he would kill Lorgar and throw his corpse back to hell. In response, Lorgar summoned a demon on the bridge where Guilliman was. Instead of fighting, this demon launched itself onto the window, breaking it, which sucked the Ultramarines' Primarch out into space. In the following minutes, Erebus and Lorgar summoned hordes of demons in rituals powered by the death of millions of soldiers and civilians. Using their Chaos allies, the Wordbearers killed the crew of battleships and battle barges to take control of them after the battle ended. Only the flagship, the Krage's Honor, managed to repel this assault, at the cost of the massacre of its crew. With the battle in space won, the traitors began an orbital bombardment of the southern hemisphere of the planet, destroying all its cities and army outposts. In the north, scattered resistance units went into hiding, not being able to withstand the superior firepower of the traitors. They would all have been hunted down in isolation had Captain Remus Vitanis behaved similarly. He, however, made it his mission to restore communications at all costs. Rallying the Ultramarines, Imperial Army, and Mechanicum, he restored a Vox radio using an old device located in a shelter beneath the Gubernator Palace.
Nice.
With communication re-established, the reconnected army could now regroup. However, it was still vastly outnumbered and outgunned by the traitors. Around the same time, the traitors took control of the orbital defense platforms and used them to bombard the sun, sacrificing it to the Chaos gods. The Loyalists had to take back control of the defense systems as soon as possible if they wished to save Calth from destruction. To achieve that, the scrap code had to be purged, and the orbital control station had to be retaken. This required a joint effort of surface and orbit forces. For now, reinforcements were needed on the surface, and an additional strike group had to be formed in orbit. With intercepted communication, the Wordbearers attacked Remus's position with successively larger armies. Meanwhile, the tech priests discovered that an antivirus to the scrap code was uploaded to the civilian data engine in a different city. 10 hours into the battle, Remus took the majority of his forces to take control of the data engine, while leaving a small force to protect the communication center. By now, his army was several times bigger due to the constant flow of regrouping loyalists. Meanwhile, in orbit, the Macrage's honor was about to be boarded. The Ultramarines went into space to prevent the cutting off of the airlocks. Despite their bravery, there were just too many word-bearers. When defeat was imminent, Robute Guilliman arrived. He had survived 10 hours in space, with only hate and fury keeping him on his feet. After swiftly killing the boarding team and getting in contact with the surface, the Primarch teleported to the orbital control platform with 50 Space Marines at his side. Pushing through deck by deck, they finally reached the command center occupied by Khor Ferren. In the duel that followed, the Chaos Sorcerer defeated the exhausted Guilliman, yet instead of killing him, Khor Ferren wanted to turn the Primarch to Chaos in order to match Erebus's achievement. This plan backfired when Robute punched out one of Khor Ferren's hearts. Then, instead of finishing the first captain, the Primarch took control of the orbital platforms. This gave time for Khor Ferren to escape into the warp, with Macrage's honor chasing him so deep into the bowels of the Immaterium that it was lost for the entirety of the Horus Heresy. Back on the surface, the Ultramarines had managed to purge the scrap code. However, in doing so, they earned the attention of the majority of the traitor army, who rushed towards their position. This all-out assault by the Word-Bearers backfired, as precise orbital strikes from the newly retaken defense systems hammered their position, destroying all the traitors' titans and artillery. However, the cheering of victory swiftly stopped when the sun started emitting severe radiation, scorching all life from the surface. All who were still alive on the planet, civilians, loyalists and traitors alike, went into the underground shelters. The fighting would not stop while a single Ultramarine or Word-Bearer was still alive. The so-called Underground War continued for another 7 years, until 014 M31, which ended in Loyalist victory. In the end, the Ultramarines lost 120,000 Space Marines, with an additional 24,000 crippled, and more than 500,000 Imperial and Mechanicum infantry were lost. In orbit, 80% of the fleet was destroyed, and barely any surviving vessel was undamaged. The traitors achieved their primary goal of destabilizing Calth and severely crippling the Ultramarines' fleet. However, this came at the cost of almost all their forces. The ambition of Khor Ferren saved the life of Guilliman, and resulted in him losing the battle on the planet's surface. As the Battle of Calth was taking place, the World Eaters and the other half of the Word-Bearers attacked the unsuspecting and vulnerable planets of the Ultramar sector. The traitors in their Shadow Crusade split their army into dozens of smaller fleets, as no defensive force was ready for this betrayal. Hundreds of worlds burned in a matter of a year, with a fifth of Guilliman's domain sacrificed to chaos in order to create the Ruin Storm. These warp phenomena would cut off the entire east sector of the galaxy from Terra, removing the Ultramarines, Dark Angels and Blood Angels from the main events of the war. Yet even with the death toll exceeding the hundreds of billions, Lorgar needed a final conduit to bring down this calamity in the warp, one he couldn't find. The revelation finally came to him on the planet Armatura. This was the war planet of Ultramar. Military personnel from all branches, be it logistics, navy, infantry, or even Space Marines recruits, trained there, accounting for over 1 billion souls in total. With such an important role, Ultramar was the most defended planet in the sector. It was protected by several layers of orbital defense platforms, around 100 spaceships, 25 Titans, and around 40,000 Evocati, veteran Ultramarines who distinguished themselves in combat. These defenses were considered to be unconquerable by any single fleet, yet these calculations were based on Imperial databases. In secret, Lorgar had built 3 gargantuan Abyss-class battleships, each one requiring 500,000 crewmen to operate. Although one of them had been lost in a lone attack on the Ultramar capital Macrage when it was blown up from the inside. In their main assault on Ultramar, the traitors brought the remaining 2 flying weapons of ruin, half their fleet, 100,000 Space Marines from both the Word-Bearers and World Eaters, 100 Titans and 2 Primarchs, Lorgar Aurelian and Angron. Without any subtlety, the planet was attacked head-on, unleashing unthinkable levels of firepower on the orbital defenses. On the surface, the Evocati tried to set up defense lines and ambushes, but were ultimately unable to stop the traitors' momentum. What helped the Ultramarines were the differences between the 2 traitor legions. The Word-Bearers were slow in their offensive, methodically advancing while sacrificing the captured and wounded enemies to chaos. On the other hand, the World Eaters attacked recklessly, without any hesitation, diving headfirst into melee combat, as all of them, including Angron, had implanted the Butcher's nails into their brain. This machinery blocked any emotion other than anger, while granting pleasure from fighting and carnage. In a short span of time, the two traitor armies created a substantial gap between them, one which the Loyalists exploited. In spite of tactical brilliance, the size difference was too great, and all of the defenders died that day, with the planet being bombarded from orbit soon after. Looking at Angron in the wake of the battle, Lorgar discovered the horrible truth. Angron was dying. The Butcher's nails, active non-stop ever since the Horus Heresy started, were destroying Angron's brain. He had at most a month left to live. Lorgar understood that the key to summoning the Ruinstorm lay within the moment of Angron's death. As a friend, he approached Angron and promised him that the key to saving his life was on the planet Nukeria, Angron's homeworld, which had been abandoned by the Imperium.
Lorgar really
Taking
went over
only
the
one
edge.
Abyss-class monstrosity,
He's
two
a true
flagships,
zealot.
the remaining 90 Titans, and 20,000 Space Marines, the expedition ventured to Nukeria. During the journey, Khan, the World Eater's second-in-command, and his friend Argel Tal, a favorite legionary of Lorgar, decided to fix the growing madness in their legions. Insubordination, leaving assigned positions during combat, lack of strategic thinking, and distrust had been spreading like wildfire. Their fear of losing their only friend was strong enough that the two developed a state of restrained madness, improving their control when lost to the implants or the chaos spawn inside them. After a month of travel, the first signs of positive change were seen, especially after the World Eaters understood that soon Khan would have to lead them after Angron's death. On Nukeria, Angron found out that the slave lords, who had enslaved him before his reunification with the Emperor, were still in charge of the planet, and that he was remembered as a coward who abandoned those who needed him the most. Enraged, Angron ordered the people of the planet to be executed en masse. A week-long massacre ensued, but during the purging of the last remaining city, the Ultramarines arrived. Guilliman rallied as many survivors as he could, bringing 41 line spaceships, all smaller than the traitor equivalents. It is unknown how many Space Marines and Titans were transported inside them. However, Lorgar decided not to find out, and ordered his fleets to thwart any attempt Guilliman would make at shuttling troops to the surface. The traitor fleet split apart, covering a wide area of orbit, with each vessel fighting independently. The plan worked, with only Guilliman's ship breaking through the blockade. On the surface, the World Eaters lost to the Butcher's Nail's fury, and spilled out to attack the landing zones of the Ultramarines. A brutal and chaotic melee followed, fanning out across the scorched city. During this battle, the first signs of cooperation between the traitor legions were seen, overcoming their tempestuous nature and embracing strategic thinking, with Argel Tal and Khan spearheading the traitor counteroffensive. The fighting stopped for a moment when a giant 22-kilometer-long Wordbearer's flagship started falling from the sky. The smoke trail behind its back split the sky in two. The tsunami created from its impact swept away half of the city. In the following moments, Guilliman found Lorgar, and the two Primarchs dueled. The long and equal fight was interrupted by Angron, who swiftly brought Roboute down. Yet at this moment, his brain gave up after being extensively attacked by the Butcher's Nails, as a storm of emotions from his homeworld and thoughts of killing his brother were present in his mind. During the agonizing last moments of Angron, the Ultramarines decided to escape, as both the battles in orbit and on the surface were a lost cause. Following their retreat, Lorgar started his vile ritual, bringing even more pain to Angron. Yet it wasn't the death of Angron that would create the Ruinstorm, as he already considered himself a dead weapon of destruction for the last century. Instead, in an act of ultimate betrayal, Lorgar defiled the Primarch's soul and body as an offer to the Chaos God Khorne, the god who had been denied Sanguinus not so long ago. Thus, the first ever demon Primarch was born, with Butcher's Nails still inside his head, keeping Angron in a state of eternal agony, relieved only by insatiable and ever-growing bloodthirst. Mirroring the actions of his Primarch, Erebus betrayed Argel Tal, backstabbing him on the back of a captured Titan. The last hope of bringing the Wordbearers and World Eaters out of Chaos influence died with him, damning the two legions to eternal servitude of chaos. With the galaxy split, the majority of the remaining Loyalist forces were removed from the Horus heresy. Despite all their successes, chaos was degenerating more and more of the traitors. The first demon Primarch was born. Who will be the next one? Will the Dark Angels be able to break through the Ruinstorm with their Xeno device? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one. The Ruinstorm had been unleashed, and with no hope of matching the traitors' forces, the Loyalist situation was now grim. Yet even with the overwhelming force of his armies, Horus still needed a tool to defeat the Emperor himself. To win against his father, he would need to achieve power akin to a god. How could a mortal man obtain such a thing? How much will be sacrificed to get it? Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 9th video, we will explore Horus's attempts to get supreme power from the Eye of Terror and Molech. And we've also got a shout out for something fans of 40k on tabletop need to get in on if they aren't already, our sponsor Infinity. Infinity is another sci-fi tabletop wargame, set in a future that is less grim-dark but just as action-packed as Warhammer's vision. It's a future where humanity is almost united, but not quite. Nations have merged into a small number of large alliances, and while they aren't at war with each other, they certainly aren't peaceful either. Competition for resources has brought these powers to a state classified as Code Infinity, the utmost verge of war, in which rival special intelligence services battle using elite teams of agents. That's where the tabletop miniatures and the multiplayer wargaming comes into play. And there's about to be a great introduction to this world in the form of Infinity Paradise Lost, an upcoming animated series in the Infinity canon. It'll be a beautifully rendered tale of action and espionage in this tense sci-fi Cold War scenario, in which the rivalries of humanity are set in contrast with the emergence of alien civilizations, believed long extinct. Basically, now's an excellent time to get in on the world of Infinity, so we'll link you to the game and the trailer for the upcoming show in the description below.
And paint lots of miniatures.
At the beginning of 008M31, Fulgrim, the Primarch of the Emperor's children, arrived at Hydra Codatus, a world that the Iron Warriors had just captured. On the planet's surface, Fulgrim met Perturabo, the Iron Warriors' Primarch, and told him about a weapon of incomparable might. This weapon, called Angel Exterminatus, came from Eldar legends, and was supposedly used in the past to imprison an Eldar god. Fulgrim also presented an Eldar guide who would show them the way to this weapon's location. Perturabo knew that Fulgrim wasn't being straight with him, for he would never reveal that information if there weren't a catch. Despite this, he decided to play along, for there was something of great value that had to be there. Thus, the main fleets of the two legions combined into one armada, comprising 300 warships in total, and set off in search of the Angel Exterminatus. The expedition ventured into the Eye of Terror, a physics-defying region of the galaxy. This place was once home to the Eldar, yet after the birth of the Chaos god Slanesh, it had become a gate of hell. The warp bled into reality, creating a warp storm outside of the Immaterium. Inside, planets changed shapes and collapsed onto themselves in a matter of minutes, yet new ones were born shortly after. Black holes that should have devoured the entire region remained static, as if their gravity did not exist. With the help of an Eldar guide, the traitors found a path through the mystic Eye of Terror. Their voyage was stopped when a sudden explosion of energy erupted from behind them. A loyalist battleship, the Sisypheum, was following them. The survivors of Istvan V wanted to deny Angel Exterminatus to the traitors, but while experimenting with a new weapon, their ship was overloaded with energy, giving away their position. The traitors began a boarding attempt on the temporarily immobilized vessel with an attack spearheaded by mutated Space Marine prisoners. These abominations, that barely resembled humans, wanted only to kill and die. Few could resist their ferocity, yet those who did were cut down by the traitor Space Marines and Perturabo's personal
Chaos. They have absolutely no mercy. Like, really. No mercy at all. Like that. There we go.
robot guard. As the Loyalists were losing ground, the traitors detected an energy spike in the Sisypheum. The traitors believed the Loyalists were preparing to blow up the ship with Perturabo on it, and an immediate evacuation was ordered. Instead, the Loyalists overloaded their engines and rammed through the Emperor's Children's battleship, escaping deeper into the Eye of Terror. 10 days later, the traitors arrived at their destination, the Eldar crone world Eidris. Once, Eidris had housed billions of Eldar, but now it was a dead planet. The army made landfall out.
Fulgrim has got to be the biggest nuisance in all of Warhammer. That dude just comes back, and comes back.
Outside the ruins of an Eldar city. In the face of an unknown threat inside, a small fortress with gun batteries was raised in front of the derelict Eldari walls. Having now set up artillery support, the
Aw, it looks so cute. Looks like it's got a little noise base.
majority of the 100,000 Space Marines entered the Ghost City alongside both Primarchs, 4,000 tanks, and 2 Titans. They made their way through the abandoned streets, marveling at the wondrous architecture and statues of Eldar of varying sizes. Eventually, the army reached the center of the city, a giant mausoleum. The Primarchs ventured into this tomb with 1,000 Astartes each, while the rest of the expedition fortified the entrance. Soon they found themselves deep in the bowels of a labyrinth, which did not obey the laws of standard geometry, and would be impossible for anyone but Perturabo to navigate. After many hours, the expedition reached the end of the maze, a burial hall of the Eldar. Millions of glowing purple crystals, each one with a soul of a dead Eldar inside, were laid upon the walls, but there was no sign of any weapon. The intrusion in the mausoleum was noticed by the Chaos God Slanesh. Back on the surface, the Emperor's children, who were followers of this Chaos God, started killing each other, their pain and sacrifice fueling the defensive mechanism of the planet. All the Eldar statues came to life and attacked the humans. In their relentless assault, every death, either Eldar or human, gave more power to Slanesh. To fuel the carnage, the Chaos God
Even when their goals align, they occasionally go AWOL.
Started filling the heads of the Space Marines with their deepest desires. The commander of the artillery positions gave in to the temptations and ordered a prolonged artillery barrage on the positions in front of the mausoleum, killing thousands of Iron Warriors. Meanwhile, deep within the planet, the Primarchs were also attacked by the Eldar statues and revenants. Having only 2,000 Astartes, they had no chance of withstanding the assault. Thus, Fulgrim and a mysteriously weakened Perturabo ventured even deeper to find the Angel Exterminatus. Yet their search was for naught, for the weapon did not exist. Here, the final gambits revealed themselves. Fulgrim had lured his brother here to become the demon Primarch of Slanesh, and intended to fuel his ascension with his brother's life. For the last few weeks, he had siphoned Perturabo's life force using a fist-sized gem called Malgatar. Fulgrim had defeated Perturabo, yet in a final act of defiance, Perturabo threw the gem into a chasm, and with it his life force that was needed for Fulgrim to ascend. Enraged, Fulgrim stabbed Perturabo, which caused infighting to break out between the traitor legions. Slanesh was amused enough by the current events to grant Fulgrim's wish without the sacrifice of Perturabo. Instead, his apotheosis was fueled by millions of Eldar souls trapped within the purple crystals. While the transformation was happening, the Loyalists from Sisypheum arrived and destroyed the Malgatar stone, giving Perturabo his strength back. A brutal 3-way combat started, which abruptly ended when Fulgrim was reborn as a snake-like demon. His first action was to teleport away all of the Emperor's children out of the Eye of Terror as the planet Eidris started collapsing. The Iron Warriors had no such ability to warp away, and, stuck on the imploding planet, were sucked into a black hole, which would send them to the other end of the galaxy, to the Talon system. Seeing what had become of Fulgrim, Horus resolved to find out how useful he would be in the war effort. In 009 M31, Horus, plagued by the visions of his past, decided to attack Molech, a planet where the Emperor had managed to increase his psychic powers. The secret of this planet was guarded by 58 million Imperial troops, 50 Titans, 500 Space Marines.
The amount of Titans they had, and then the amount that they have now, was like ghastly, ghastly decreased.
And roughly 2,000 Mechanicum Knights. The Mechanicum Knights were 15-meter-tall mechs that focused on speed rather than durability. To contend with this massive force, the traitors brought the majority of the remaining Death Guard and Sons of Horus to bear on Molech. In total, their force consisted of 100,000 Space Marines, 3 Primarchs, Mortarion, Horus and Fulgrim, 100 Titans, and the supporting force of the traitor Imperial Army. Immediately after their arrival, the traitors won the battle in orbit and primed themselves to obliterate Molech's planetary defenses. However, wanting to gain power as his father had decades ago, Horus was careful not to destroy the Warp Gate. Instead, the wreckage from Molech's fleet was thrown into the planet's oceans, creating tsunamis that wiped out coastal cities. Horus wanted to regain memories of the past, so he recreated the landing he made with the Emperor years ago on a planetary island. Next, he was forced to make an amphibious attack on the continent. A bloody battle was waged on shore, and the Loyalists were ultimately driven back. Meanwhile, the Death Guard attacked from the eastern side of the continent. In their path stood a thick jungle, full of giant deadly beasts. Using the first Plague Marine, who went ahead of the army and decayed all living beings and plants around him, a path for the army was created. Terrified of the Plague Marine, the beasts fled, forming a stampede that barreled into the Loyalist position on the other side of the jungle, leaving them defenseless against the incoming Death Guard. Over the next few months, the traitors advanced through the Loyalist positions until both armies linked up in front of the capital of Lupercalia. At the same time, Fulgrim slowly corrupted the Knights' pilots. At first, the change was as small as removing pleasure from battles to encourage the defenders to hunt in their time off the front line, but in the end they were fully converted into cultists of Slanesh. The final battle of Lupercalia would have lasted weeks if the corrupted knights had not destroyed the Loyalist Titans, compromising the city's defences. After Molech was conquered, Horus stepped into the Warp Gate. From the perspective of those around him, Horus was inside for mere moments. However, when the War Master re-emerged, he had visibly aged. In Horus's perspective, he had spent hundreds, if not thousands of years waging war against the Chaos armies, trying to become an equal of the Chaos gods. He achieved partial success in this bizarre war, for he was granted power.
I thought he was empowered by all 4 of the there's 5 primary Chaos gods, and then there's the 3 lesser ones, and then there's the 4 big league dudes that empowered him that I thought.
Power beyond imagination. However, this had come at the cost of his sanity and free will, for the part of his soul that defied chaos remained locked behind the Warp Gate. With each passing day, Horus lost part of his mind, but the trade-off was that he now had enough power to combat the Emperor. During the campaign on Molech, the Knights Errant, Space Marines serving under the Regent of Terra, Malkador, infiltrated Horus's flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. Although many of these elite Astartes died, they managed to plant a beacon inside the ship, one that would allow for the Loyalists to attack Horus's position directly. This happened time and time again, with 3 formations attempting to slow the traitors' approach on Terra. The first were survivors of the Dropsite Massacre, over 30 independent groups of whom attacked supply convoys and patrol ships, or like Sisypheum, tried to kill Primarchs. The second group was the White Scars Exiles, most of whom had joined forces with the survivors of Istvan V. The third group were special agents under the command of Malkador, who were either Knights Errant or Imperial assassins. Their main objective was to kill Horus before he reached Terra. The success of this guerrilla campaign severely damaged the traitors' supply lines. The path from the Coronage Deeps to the front line was too long and too exposed. To address this issue, Horus decided to conquer another industrial region, the Thramas sector, which was on the other side of the Ruin Storm. In the final days of 007 M31, Horus dispatched the entirety of the Night Lord's Legion, with its Primarch Conrad Kurz at their head, to seize the Thramas sector. This force consisted of 100,000 Space Marines, 200 Titans, thousands of tanks, and just over 200 battleships. The Thramas region did not have the defences to fight against such a colossal army. The Night Lords were known for their tactics of harrowing terror. As such, the terrified defenders put up little resistance, hoping to avoid torture and retaliations on civilians. Those who fought back were flayed and sent to surrounding planets as a warning. Many of the local Mechanicum joined the traitors, further increasing the gap in strength. The only planet that remained defiant was the capital, Thramas proper. They put up 6 months of grueling defense, and when their defenses began to crumble, the Loyalists slaughtered the population of the entire world to spare them the torture of the Night Lords. In 008 M31, the Dark Angels arrived in the Thramas sector after receiving distress calls. Their force consisted of 300 warships, 70,000 Space Marines, 100 Titans, and their Primarch Lionel Johnson. Seizing the initiative while the Night Lords were dispersing around many planets, Lion swiftly struck at Galatia with an army 3 times bigger than the garrison. The Night Lords fled, abandoning the traitor Mechanicum to their death. The Dark Angels purged all the heretics with vigilance, leaving the planet completely devastated. In the next 2 months of the campaign, the Night Lords used their slave armies to delay the Dark Angels as the traitors regrouped. Hundreds of thousands of civilians and soldiers in hiding decided to break away from their traitor overlords and aided the Dark Angels. Inadvertently, this spread the Dark Angels thin, for Lion didn't want to let his new allies fight and die alone. Without momentum, the war became a grinding stalemate. In order to find a breakthrough, Conrad Kurz allied himself with 3,000 traitor White Scars, as well as the outcasts and degenerates who had hidden themselves from Imperial authority. Cannibals, heretical Mechanicum of Ulan Huda, Psychers, and other abominations joined the traitor war effort. In a sudden attack, the Loyalists were forced to cede ground. 8 planets were lost before the year ended. The Night Lords wanted to achieve a final breakthrough on the Crucible. To that end, they attacked with 12,000 Space Marines, 25 Titans, and 50,000 newly conscripted soldiers.
Man, they're really just throwing these Titans out like they're easy to make. Clearly not.
Using their militia as meat shields, the traitors made planetfall. Meanwhile, Conrad Kurz decided against prolonged battle, instead risking the entire battle on a gambit to split the Dark Angels apart. The Loyalists began a tactical withdrawal. Believing their enemy to be in total rout, the traitors broke ranks and began a disorganized looting spree. Lion then unleashed 7 robots on Conrad Kurz, men of iron, whom he had recovered in the past and kept in stasis. This pinnacle of all human technology wasn't enough to defeat a Primarch, yet it occupied him long enough for the Dark Angels to decimate the unsuspecting Night Lords.
Alright, Primarchs are essentially demigods. Based on everything we've heard, they're significantly stronger, bigger than a regular Astartes. Custodians are even stronger than that. They're a one-man army. But they couldn't be mass-produced because they were so pure and hard to make. So they returned to the Emperor's personal guard. Now, these Primarchs that become demon princes are supposed to be even stronger than a demigod? Boy, lore here is getting power scaling very difficult for me to understand.
Traitors barely managed to escape after losing 9,000 Astartes. The Dark Angels, weary of this taxing conflict, decided to parley on the planet Seguelsa. Unfortunately, these diplomatic overtures went nowhere, the talks ending with a duel of the Primarchs. In 009 M31, the traitors were finally cornered on the planet Sheol 9. Lion, making use of his Xeno device, arrived through the warp storm from an unsuspected angle. The traitor fleet tried to salvage the situation, but was ultimately unable to fight back. the Armada split apart and left the system, leaving Konrad Kurz and 25,000 Night Lords on the planet. Outnumbering the traitors 2 to 1, the Loyalists mercilessly slaughtered the Night Lords. Konrad Kurz, however, managed to escape, boarding the Dark Angel's flagship and hiding himself within its bowels. Following the battle, the Night Lords had lost over half their forces, and unit cohesion broke down entirely. Those who survived split into war bands to take revenge for their failures on the civilians of the galaxy. Although the Loyalists had won a crushing victory, it had still been a Pyrrhic one, for the entire Thramas sector was burned to ashes. Lion was trapped within the Ruinstorm, which proved to be impenetrable, so he decided to aid the Ultramarines, who were having trouble fighting off the World Eaters and Wordbearers marauders. How would the 3 Primarchs within the Ruinstorm proceed? Who else was trapped within the Ruinstorm? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description.
Okay, to be clear, I find it odd. The Titans were just being thrown out at every possible turn. Like, let's throw out more Titans, lose a bunch. Throw out more Titans, lose a bunch. Throw out more Titans, lose a bunch. And then 10,000 years down the line, they can't even remember how to make them. They can't, because apparently the Emperor, I'm guessing from what I understand, he restricted the Mechanicus to certain pieces of information and he kept the rest hidden himself. So unless he provided it, they couldn't make it. Which is interesting. You would think the Mechanicus would have been recording this as they were going. But man, these Titans just, oh my God, stop sacrificing them like this. They're cool. Utilize them more efficiently. Jeez. And my issue with the Imperium is their lack of orbital bombardments. Seriously, dudes. Bombard the enemies from above. How hard is it to do that? It seems like Chaos does it all the frickin' time. And then the Imperium's like, well, just keep throwing numbers at it. We're using like World War II Russian tactics. Soviet Union era.
To know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one. Isolation. Within the darkness of Ruinstorm, each planet was on its own, severed from both Terra and its surroundings. Even in the night sky, the stars were dimmed by the reddish fog, reminding all trapped within of their confinement. Without the light of Terra's Astronomicon, travel between planets was nigh impossible. As the Loyalists struggled simply to survive, the traitors stalked within the darkness, bringing utter despair and destruction. How will these seemingly doomed sectors survive? Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 10th video, we will explore events within the Ruinstorm and the creation of the Imperium Secundus. You probably know already that the Chaos Gods are an insidious influence on the minds of anyone they can get their tentacles on. The good news is that while real-life mental health issues can be just as chaotic, the path to recovery is much easier than eternal war. It's professional therapy from our paid partner, BetterHelp, at betterhelp.com/wizardsandwarriors. Whether you have a clinical issue, suspect you might, or want honest advice from a professional source to unlock your potential, your growth, and your health, BetterHelp aims to make the problems you face easier to solve.
Keep in mind that some of these videos are a few years old. But the BetterHelp ad, yeah, from what I understand, BetterHelp was doing some pretty shady stuff.
Unlike classic therapy options, BetterHelp aren't about face-to-face meetings in someone's office. They bring a professional therapist into your life via your phone, video chat, or even messaging. Mix that with extremely flexible schedules and over 30,000 therapists on their roster, and you'll be able to say what you need to say and get the advice you need at a time and place you want it. Simply fill out a questionnaire to get you matched with suitable professionals, which in most cases is done within 48 hours. Once you've found someone right for you, you pick your methods and times, but you can always change these based on how things go. Get started via our link in the description, betterhelp.com/wizardsandwarriors. This link gives a discount on your first month to help you give BetterHelp a go. Following the Battle of Nukeria, the majority of the Word-Bearers and World-Eaters left the Ultramar sector, with only a few traitors remaining behind to freely pillage vulnerable
look what they
worlds.
did to the sun.
Rabute Guilliman, the Ultramarines' Primarch, was powerless against them, as interstellar travel and communication were nearly impossible for Loyalists due to the influence of the Ruinstorm. In a desperate effort to save what was left of his domain, Rabute sent a Loyalist Iron Warrior named Barabbas Dantiok to the fringe planet of Sulthar. Sulthar was home to an ancient mountain-sized Xeno device nicknamed Pharos. After more than a year of grueling work, Dantiok managed to turn the device on. With its power, the Ultramar capital, Macragge, was lit up to serve as a beacon in the warp. Additionally, Pharos played a secondary role in allowing interstellar communication and even teleportation in emergency situations. Despite its usefulness, the Pharos wasn't omnipotent. The long process of calibration allowed communication with only 30 planets a day at most, and any attempt to communicate with anyone outside of the Ruinstorm was extremely strenuous on the device, and ultimately unsuccessful. Terra, the planet Guilliman wanted to contact the most, was completely out of reach. Guilliman had to choose what to do next, as other Loyalists would arrive soon. The first option that came to mind was a march to Terra, in order to bolster the defences of the Cradle of Humanity before Horus could reach it. However, there was no news from Terra within the Ruinstorm. For all Guilliman knew, the planet could have already been destroyed, and charging blindly into what was potentially a massive swarm of traitors posed incredible danger. Thus, the pragmatic side of Guilliman took over. He declared that until proven otherwise, the Emperor was dead and Terra had fallen. Between late 009 M31 and 010 M31, Loyalist fleets arrived, consolidating most of the forces within the Ruinstorm. In total, 47,000 Ultramarines gathered on Macragge, as the rest were part of crucial garrisons or involved in the underground war on Calth. This force consisted of Lionel Johnson and the 20,000 Dark Angels that were left after the Thramas Crusade. Joining them were 15,000 Space Marines from dozens of splinter fleets, such as the Space Wolves, White Scars, Imperial Fists, Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard. Most notable among their number was Alexis Pollux, a commander from the Battle of Thal, and Artelis Numian, the Salamander's first captain. The last ones to arrive were 100,000 Blood Angels led by Sanguinius. On top of those already assembled, two more unusual guests joined the Loyalist host. These were the Primarchs, Vulcan and Conrad Kurz. Following the Dropside massacre, Vulcan became a prisoner of Conrad Kurz, who tortured him to the best of his abilities. Yet the perpetual nature of Vulcan made him unable to die. With each passing day, Conrad inflicted increasingly vicious methods of not only torture but also murder. Vulcan was killed hundreds of times, each time regenerating back to health. After 2 years of unrelenting torture, Vulcan escaped, teleporting onto Macragge. After his ordeal, there was no humanity left inside him. All that remained was a violent shell of a man who couldn't even speak. Only days after Vulcan's arrival on Macragge, Conrad Kurz escaped Lion's flagship and started terrorizing Ultramar's capital. Sensing his hated oppressor, Vulcan started chasing after Kurz, and the two fought multiple times. Vulcan lost every time, but due to his perpetual nature, death was denied to him after his bout. Their endless series of combats ended.
Vulcan is my favorite, just so you all know. He is my favorite. I love what Vulcan is and what he represents in this universe. I just think the writers did him dirty. I really do. They were like, you can't have compassion here. Why did we make the Salamanders compassionate? Punish the Primarch.
Did when another perpetual, John Grammaticus, stabbed Vulcan through the heart with a relic spear. With this grave wound, Vulcan stopped regenerating and was put into a state of suspended death. Following this, Conrad hid in the bowels of Ultramar and waited for another opportunity to strike. Numian was shocked to discover that his Primarch gave no life signals, but he didn't give up. He took Vulcan to the Salamander's homeworld, Nocturne, and in a ritual sacrificed his life to bring Vulcan back. Yet before Vulcan returned back to his senses, he was temporarily possessed by the Emperor, who used his body to forge the Talisman of 7 Hammers, an extremely powerful artifact. Vulcan was then given an order to return to Terra. With the power of the newly acquired artifact, he started his 4-year-long voyage to Terra, using the Eldari webway to emit the Ruinstorm. Back on Macragge, Guilliman had managed to convince Sanguinius and Lion of his idea of a dead emperor. Thus, the Ultramar sector was rebranded as the last stand of the Imperium of Mankind, its role being to preserve what Horus intended to destroy. This new state was called Imperium Secundus. It would be led by a triumvirate, with Sanguinius taking the role of Imperator Regent, Lion being chosen as Lord Protector or War Master, and Guilliman being Lord Warden, the head of administration. Shortly after taking the position of Lord Protector, Lion left Macragge to look for Conrad.
Lion, I'm not sure how competent he is. He's had more success than Guilliman, though. But then Guilliman was caught off guard.
Answering every distress call, Lion fought the Word-Bearers and bands of World Eaters time and again, yet he saw no sign of Kurz. As the Imperium Secundus grew secure and stable, the scattered legion of Night Lords attempted to reforge itself. Kurkesh the Pale, along with Gendor Scrivok, gathered 20,000 Night Lords, which consisted of 40% of the remaining legionnaires. Krukesh wanted to legitimize his claim of leading the legion, so he started looking for the flagship of Conrad Kurz, the Nightfall. As the ship was badly damaged, it must have been hiding among planets uncolonized by the Imperium. In the search, the Night Lords stumbled into Sotha. As the Light of Pharos revealed its location only on Macragge, Lion decided not to draw attention to Sotha. Only a token force of 1,100 Space Marines, led by Alexis Pollux, were defending the planet. Their defensive strategy relied not on a large garrison, but on deep scouting with light ships. For months, the Night Lords stalked the defenders, learning their patrol paths and habits. After the preparations were complete, late in 010 M31, one of the Night Lords' ships was intentionally damaged to look like a drifting hulk, and sent on a collision course with Sotha. This ship was intercepted by a patrol and destroyed. Following the incident, the patrol went to the relay station to report the possible presence of the Night Lords. Unfortunately, the relay station had already been taken over by the traitors under the command of Scrivok. After the Ultramarines docked, the trap was sprung, and the Night Lords took over the ship. Scrivok filled the ship with 800 Space Marines and damaged it to the brink of destruction.
My god, man. We keep seeing Chaos being irrational, but at times they're just smarter than the Imperium.
Meanwhile, Krukesh ambushed and destroyed the rest of the patrol ships before any of them could inform the planet. Hours later, the Loyalist orbital station in orbit of Sotha was contacted by the mauled patrol ship, which requested immediate help and docking clearance. In a decision that sealed their doom, the station accepted their pleas. Caught unaware, the 500 Ultramarines in the station were decimated. However, a few strongholds remained when the main Night Lords fleet arrived. Not wanting to lose the glory of victory, Scrivok pushed his men to clear the station before Krukesh could aid him. In total, the Night Lords lost 200 men in their drive to clear orbit. Having now achieved total space dominance, the Night Lords decided against orbital bombardment, as enigmatic Pharos piqued their interest. Thus, the traitors shuttled to the surface and attacked the Castellum. The defenders put up a fierce fight, killing 2,000 Night Lords, but they were eventually overrun. Around the same time, Dantiok made contact with Macragge. Upon hearing that Sotha was under attack, Guilliman rushed to the planet. However, the journey would take him a few days. In the meantime, Dantiok managed to contact a loyalist fleet of 2,500 strong that was only 18 hours away. While his fellow loyalists called for reinforcements, Alexis Pollux tried to turn Pharos into a fortress. With only about 100 Space Marines and a contingent of Mechanicum, this was a daunting task.
No doubt.
Pharos had dozens of entrances, yet only 6 of them led inside the device. The rest led to dead ends, or shrank to sizes too small for the Space Marines. Alexis made use of most of them, luring the traitors into making pointless and costly assaults on dead ends. Rockets fired from inside the caves robbed the traitors of air support. Night Lord scouts were ambushed in quick sallies. Pharos itself helped out, as its beacon created interferences that blocked teleportations. This problem was overcome when Scrivok made a deal with a demon. At noon on the second day of battle, Krukesh teleported inside Pharos. Although several Night Lords teleported inside walls, the attack was successful, and Dantioch was taken hostage. At the same time, an all-out
Man. Chaos just getting win after win after win.
offensive was carried out. Alexis's position was overrun, but not before his men killed an additional 200 traitors. With both leaders captured, Sotha was lost and Pharos was turned off. The incoming loyalist reinforcements were now blind. However, they were only 9 hours away in sublight speed travel. Pharos was deemed too important to be left in the traitors' hands, but retaking Sotha against a traitor host that outnumbered them 7-1 was impossible. Hence, the destruction of Pharos became the main objective of their mission. After reaching the system, 200 Ultramarines dropped to the surface, with the rest remaining occupied with the fighting in orbit. Many of the drop pods were shot down, but half of them managed to link up with the battered defenders of Sotha. Advancing through the caves of Pharos, the Ultramarines managed to set demolition charges before the Night Lords caught up to them. Now in captivity, Dantioch revealed Pharos' secrets to Krukesh. After an hours-long search, Krukesh found his prize, the Nightfall. Yet as Krukesh and Scrivok teleported on board, Dantioch overloaded the device. Powerful radiant energy burned dozens of Night Lords in the primary control room and destroyed the room itself. A powerful blast disabled all ships in orbit and teleported Guilliman's fleet to Sotha. Dantioch lost his life in the process, but his sacrifice caused the death of the remaining Night Lords in the system. Although only lasting a few seconds, the blast was visible far out of the Milky Way galaxy and attracted the attention of the Tyranid hive mind, who would launch a series of galaxy-ending invasions during later eras.
Tyranids. I think they're immune to chaos, which means they're the ultimate threat, as far as I'm concerned.
Aboard the Nightfall, Scrivok killed Krukesh and abandoned the idea of reuniting the Night Lords. Instead, he left the Ruinstorm to aid Horus in his war effort. Back on Macragge, with both Guilliman and Lion missing, Conrad Kurz made his move and approached Sanguinius alone. During a tense conversation, it was revealed that both of them possessed the gift of viewing the future. While Sanguinius interpreted his visions as a mere possibility, Conrad viewed them as predestined fate. Especially horrifying was the vision of his death at the hands of an assassin sent by the Emperor. However many times Conrad had sought death, he had always survived. This inevitability caused Kurz to become completely insane. The two dueled, yet Sanguinius was incapable of killing his brother. Conrad eventually escaped in the confusion, but only after he blew up the newly arrived Blood Angels. When the light of Pharos lit up the sky of Macragge again, Sanguinius ordered both Guilliman and Lion to return. As the Triumvirate gathered again, it was decided that Lion should use all means possible to capture Conrad. Martial law was declared, gatherings of people were prohibited, a curfew was issued, and civilian communication was listened in on. Within weeks, the city of Illyrium rebelled against these draconian policies, and the Dark Angels were fired upon and attacked by suicide bombers. Although rebels had taken control of the city, there were almost 4 million civilians inside. Lion was given orders to use any means necessary short of orbital bombardment to find Kurz, who was...
Again, they don't use the orbital bombardment. What are they thinking? We're going to send more ground troops down. We're going to keep on doing this. I'm like, man, Chaos has been orbital bombarding and winning because of that. And the Imperium's like, nah, this isn't what we want to do.
Was surely leading the rebellion. 3,000 Dark Angels attacked the city, not caring about civilian casualties. Death was dealt out indiscriminately, and those harboring rebels were executed, with vast swathes of the population being transferred to internment camps. Tens of thousands lost their lives, and the city was cleared. The remaining rebels hid themselves inside a mountain range full of bunkers. For the Imperials, the optimal strategy was to bombard this mountain range from orbit, yet Lion wasn't authorized to. Stubbornly, he ordered dropships to be loaded with explosives and launched them into the hills, effectively bombing the rebels from orbit. Thus the rebels were dealt with, but Conrad still had not been caught. Yet Lion had been fighting against Kurz ever since 008 M31 and was able to predict the behavior of the insane Primarch. Thus Lion went to an abandoned temple at midnight. Just as he anticipated, he was ambushed by Conrad there. After a long fight, Lion defeated Conrad and broke his spine.
What? Finally.
Once again, Conrad's life was spared. After his capture, Kurz was put on trial in front of the citizens of Ultramar. During the judgment, Conrad revealed that Lion used dropships to orbitally bombard the rebels. Upon hearing this, Guilliman became enraged and broke Lion's sword, while Sanguinius banished Lion out of Imperium Secundus. Saddened, Lion left and set course to his homeworld of Caliban to reunite his legion. Yet, as he was preparing to leave Macragge, a revelation came to his mind. The insane Conrad told him earlier that his sword and pride would be broken. Lion teleported to Kurz's cell, where he was to be executed, and put a stop to the execution. Lion told Conrad that if his visions were inevitable, then he was destined to die from an assassin sent by the Emperor. If that was the case, then the Emperor must still be alive, and Terra must still be standing. If this was the case, then they had to rush to humanity's homeworld before Horus could destroy it. Conrad was bewildered. For the third time this year, his death was denied. Instead, he became a prisoner of Lion, chained on his ship and used as an oracle. Thus, the Imperium Secundus was dissolved, and most records of its existence were destroyed. The practical side of Guilliman had delayed the arrival of 180,000 Astartes to Terra by 2 entire years. But the War Master did not wait for them. His armies marched closer to Terra. Will they arrive on time, or will Horus win the war before they arrive? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it.
All I gotta say is, Guilliman, he's my second favorite Primarch. I just like how he thinks like a tactician, focuses on trying to accomplish the goal, and he just follows it based on the intel he's got. It's the best you can do. But man, I'll tell you this. Chaos, they're kicking butt. They are kicking butt. More butt than I honestly thought that they were going to kick.
Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
You're a weirdo. Go lay down. Pax, go lay down, buddy. Go on. You need to chill.
At the height of the Horus Heresy, the armies of the War Master dominated the galaxy, and the final offensive drew near. Yet before the grand assault, Horus had to finally deal with the shattered legions, who had been a thorn in the traitor's side for far too long. While the War Master was occupied, Alfarius brewed a scheme of his own. Would the White Scars and the Space Wolves reach Terra before a disaster happens? Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 11th video, we will explore how Horus finally secured his supply lines and cover his first incursions into the solar system. As Horus drew closer to Terra, his supply lines grew longer, and as the Loyalists noticed their enemy's logistical problems, they saw an opportunity to strike. Their relentless attacks forced harsh responses from the traitors. First, the escorts were bolstered, and then rapid response fleets were formed. The Loyalist efforts to impede the heretics' advance were valiant but futile. As years passed and the warp storms appeared all over the galaxy, the Loyalists could lay ambushes in fewer and fewer places. When the Ruin Storm was summoned, it restricted their possibilities even more and cut off a sizable portion of their forces. In the wake of this cataclysm, the traitors had regained some degree of control. Despite this, the Shattered Legions continued to strike where they could, with many of their attacks still ending in success. Eventually, in late 008 M31, Horus decided that it was time to end the harassment of the Shattered Legions for good. Before the year ended, a major Loyalist base on Dwell was discovered. Horus Lupercal and Horus Aximand led the following assault. Space Marines, led by Shadrach Medusan, the mastermind behind the guerrilla warfare, awaited in ambush to kill the War Master. The trap was sprung on the wrong Horus, the member of the Mournival Aximand. In the chaotic battle, Aximand survived the ambush by the skin of his teeth due to the timely arrival of reinforcements, escaping with grievous injuries to his face. The battle was fierce, but the 8 million-strong Imperial army was slaughtered. Shadrach Medusan was able to escape the massacre of his troops, so Captain Tybalt Mar of the Sons of Horus was given a mission to hunt him down. His task force was given several thousand Space Marines and at least 50 ships.
While
Medusan remained elusive, many elements of his loyalist fleet were hunted down. Eventually, Shadrach gathered his fleet to meet Tybalt Mar in an open field. The space battle of the Agrana Chain in 010 M31 started with Shadrach in constant retreat, his forces being half the size of the traitors. They hoped to catch the traitors overextended, yet no opportunity for counterattacking presented itself. Instead, the loyalists got themselves cornered. In the fight that followed, Shadrach attempted every desperate tactic in the book, even turning spaceships into suicide bombs. This gave the loyalists an opportunity to escape, once they turned in order to chase after Tybalt. In this heroic charge, the gap in fleet size became the deciding factor, and Medusan, along with almost all of his forces, was slain. In the following year, 011 M31, a final end was put to the loyalist harassment efforts. That year, Jagatai Khan gave a recall order to the exiled White Scars. Of roughly 15,000 exiled, only 132 returned. Jagatai had hoped for way more, as he was in dire need of warriors, but the rest were either dead or within the Ruinstorm. For the last 4 years, the White Scars were engaged in hit-and-run warfare. Now they were ready to go back to the solar system, but this was easier said than done, for the warp storms cut off all but one escape route to Terra. The Kellium Gate was defended by a third of the Emperor's children, under the command of Lord Commander Eidolon. The White Scars, who at this point were reduced to only 35,000 Space Marines, conducted several raids on it. The final attempt to breach the Kellium Gate was made in 011 M31. In a grinding battle, thousands died on both sides. Jagatai Khan dueled Eidolon and was defeated, for it was only a feint, and the Primarch was impersonated by Captain Chin Sha. During the diversion, the White Scars looked for navigator Pieter Ashilo. This exceptional man supposedly knew a way through the deep immaterium that was safe from the warp storms. The search was successful and brought them to Catalyst Rift. This anomaly, created by the genius navigator, was a small spherical warp storm inside reality with a hollow center. Hidden in its bellows was a space station, the base of Ashilo. Jagatai Khan and Yesuge, the chief librarian, entered inside the installation, noting that its systems looked offline. No survivors were found, and Ashilo was confirmed dead. Outside the station, the White Scars fleet soon discovered that they had been followed. Wanting to eliminate the White Scars ahead of the Siege of Terra, Horus sent Mortarion to aid Eidolon in eradicating them. The entirety of the Death Guard, except the fleet under First Captain Callus Typhon, rallied to deal with the Loyalists. With the aid of the demons, the two traitor legions reached Catalyst only hours after the Scars. Their fleet was close to 300 ships, twice the amount of the White Scars. Bracing for the coming assault, Jubal Khan, the acting commander of the fleet, deployed 100 ships around the space station and awaited the return of his Primarch. Concurrently, Shiban Khan took 50 frigates to attack emerging traitors. Using a short time window of numerical superiority, Shiban swiftly destroyed smaller traitor vessels. The arrival of the Death Guard battleships sounded the retreat signal for the Loyalist vanguard. Around the same time, Jagatai Khan returned from the space station prepared for the heroic last stand. Yesuge, however, ventured deeper into the station and found out that its installation was a prototype of the secret device the Emperor had built on Terra. Fueling the first iteration of the Golden Throne with his own life, Yesuge opened an escape path, through which the Loyalists promptly retreated. Jagatai's flagship, manned by redeemed White Scars, stayed behind. Hopelessly charging at Mortarion, they occupied the traitors long enough for the path to close. The rest of the White Scars had found themselves inside the Webway. This ancient galaxy-spanning network of tunnels inside the warp was inaccessible to all but Eldars. To navigate through it, the intent mattered more than the direction of travel. Remu Avida, a loyalist Thousand Sun librarian, took it upon himself to bring the fleet to the solar system. This exhaustive task had to be ended early, as the Webway near Terra was a combat zone full of demons. Emerging back to reality, the White Scars ran into the Space Wolves. Leman Russ, the Space Wolves' Primarch, decided not to hold a grudge over the events at Alaxis Nebula. The two legions continued their journey towards Terra, oblivious to the grievous dangers the solar system was facing. In 004 M31,
Well, they already
when
know
Magnus the Red
Horus has
tried to
betrayed
warn
them.
the Emperor of Horus's
sound like they're
betrayal,
walking
the
into
webway
something
near
they
Terra
don't
was
know.
damaged. Unending tides of demons rushed into previously inaccessible space. To keep the forces of chaos away from Terra, the Emperor was forced onto the Golden Throne. To free himself of this confinement and ultimately win against chaos, the webway had to be repaired. To that end, all forces that could be trusted beyond doubt were sent to repair the breach. In total, their Imperial forces consisted of 10,000 Adeptus Custodes, almost all Sisters of
Oh boy, the Adeptus Custodes. They alone are a force to be reckoned with.
Silence, and a significant Mechanicum task force, consisting of Titans, tanks, infantry, and, most vital in this war, combat servitors. These were lobotomized criminals turned into battle cyborgs, capable of executing simple instructions. At first, the war within the webway went smoothly. The presence of the Sisters of Silence weakened the demons and disabled their sorcery. The Adeptus Custodes scouted ahead, mapping out all of the tens of thousands of crossroads, and kept the Chaos Hordes dispersed. Next, the Mechanicum conducted armored assaults, taking control of the intersections and then fortifying them with combat servitors. After the cyborgs were deployed, the Mechanicum continued onwards to seize another of the endless crossroads. This doctrine allowed the creation of a secure network of tunnels, granting loyalists stable supply lines and allowing them to maintain crude man-made parts of the webway. After 4 years of never-ending battle, the loyalists reached Kalistar, an abandoned Eldar settlement. Soon it was nicknamed Impossible City, as the amount of crossroads in this multi-level town exceeded human understanding. It was captured after another year of fighting, but the number of servitors needed on crossroads caused a depletion of forces and prisoners in all star systems near Terra. Up to this point, the Loyalists were fighting disorganized hordes of demons that battled against their own kin as often as against humans. However, only months after capturing Kalistar, Lorgar Aurelian, the Wordbearer's Primarch, became aware of this war in the webway. He responded quickly, directing an army of Titans, World Eaters and Wordbearers to the webway.
Oh my
While
God.
it wasn't enough to stop the advance of the Loyalists, it slowed them considerably. The Servitors were not enough to stop the Space Marines, which often forced the redirection of the Loyalist offensive to retake the lost tunnels. This tug of war bought enough time for a wildcard to appear. The warp entity known as Dragnyen, meaning the Ender of Empires, entered the webway. It was born out of murder and betrayal. Its essence was malice. Dragnyen first started hunting down Custodes, slowly gaining more and more sentience as it absorbed humanity's finest warriors. In just a few weeks, it had killed 2 of the 3 commanders of the Custodes. Days later, it became a tyrannical commander of all present demons, completely stopping the infighting between them. Time and time again, Dragnyen sent hordes of demons out on suicidal attacks, which rapidly depleted Loyalist forces. In a matter of a month, all progress that had been made over the years was undone. When all seemed lost, the Emperor himself stepped in. 1,000 Psykers were sacrificed to fuel the Golden Throne for just a single day. The Overlord of Humanity summoned the souls of the dead heroes of mankind. Custodes, Space Marines, and Ferrus Manus arrived and started slaughtering the demons. The Ender of Empires clashed with the Maker of One. The fight ended after only 1 blow. Dragnyen struck. However, instead of achieving victory, the Commander of Chaos was sealed inside a sword. The Emperor gave this sentient weapon to Ra-Endymion, the last commander of forces within the webway. He ordered him to run and keep the sword away from Terra, a task he managed to accomplish for nearly 800 years. With Dragnyen neutralized, it was time for the Emperor to return to the Golden Throne. During his withdrawal, all remaining forces were evacuated, and the webway was sealed. Now the Emperor's project lay forever in ruins, with his custodians having lost more than 90% of their men, forcing him to remain on the Golden Throne. With such a disastrous situation prevailing on Terra, the Alpha Legion made its move. Their agents, be they Space Marines, bribes or indoctrinated humans, or corrupted servitors, had been put all around the solar system. Most of them were placed there even before the Horus Heresy started, and awaited their orders patiently. Eventually, Alpharius himself arrived inside the Imperial Palace late in 010 M31. After months of waiting, a mobilization signal was sent. Shortly after, a cargo ship exploded in Terra's orbit. General chaos erupted, amplified by several other smaller diversions, as the name of the War Master was repeatedly chanted on the Vox radio. Yet Dawn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists saw through this charade, refusing to fall for these distractions, and discovering the traitor's true objective. Being on the brink of capturing Alfarius, Dawn realized that this sudden strike was an attempt to goad him into action, and it had succeeded. Frightened of being played like that again, Dawn delegated the investigation of this incursion to Archimus, master of Huskarl's special forces. To completely sever himself from the investigation, Dawn left the solar system to investigate unusual radio silence in the nearby star systems. Meanwhile, Archimus looked through thousands of used clearance codes. After only a few hours, an important bribed operative, named Dowager Son Hiriko, was found. While the Imperial Fists stormed his hideout on Terra to capture him, Alpha Legion sent a lone space marine to silence him for eternity. In the end, the Loyalists emerged triumphant. Archimus knew Hiriko was too crucial for the Alpha Legion, and that another assassination attempt on him was inevitable. Instead of guessing when it should happen, he created a trap in the asteroid ring between Mars and Jupiter to try to bait the assassins out. Acting as the lure, Dowager Son sent a message, as if he had managed to escape and was awaiting rescue. Despite knowing it was bait, Alfarius still attacked. The Huskarls were not ready to fight against a Primarch. Their ambush failed, and Hiriko was killed.
The crazy part about all this is Chaos, as crazy and psycho as they are, they're organized. It's a weird contradiction. I mean, they got demon Primarchs that are former demigods, now even stronger. They got Horus, who was originally pretty dumb as a war master, and now he comes back as a host of 4 chaos gods, and their entire traitors legions are just, they're giving the loyalists a run for their money. I thought Gilliman could turn it around, but man, he couldn't even do that. Poor Gilliman. And then Vulcan, my favorite, got turned into a disabled person. Sad, poor Vulcan. Apparently he recovered himself, though, and got a really powerful hammer. But, I mean, it just doesn't seem like he's doing much.
The only positive was that Archimus managed to tail Alfarius' ship. Meanwhile, a giant armada of Alpha Legion, numbering just over 200 spaceships, was nearing the solar system. During the year-long travel, the ships had their engines turned off, and were so close together that long-range scanners mistook them for an asteroid. Upon arrival at their destination, a quarter of the force was powered up, and the Alpha Legion started the Battle of Pluto. As the grand majority of the defense fleet was...
Pluto isn't a planet anymore. Apparently it's just a planetary body. Poor Pluto. It was one of our planets for so long. Then the entire scientific community decided to remove it. Poor Pluto.
Was blockading Mars, or left the solar system with Dawn, the defending force was a relatively meager force of 4 Pluto moons turned into orbital defense platforms, and 30 Imperial ships under the command of Sigismund. To cover up the assault on every planet and every major space station, Alpha Legion started uprisings, terror attacks, and sabotage. All this diversion served the purpose of diverting attention from Pluto. When the Loyalists spotted 50 traitor ships, Sigismund engaged and led a boarding action. To his surprise, the ships had no space marines inside, only a skeleton crew of servitors. The overextended fleet of Loyalists was flanked by 150 vessels under Kel Silonius, the Harrow Master, and the first captain Ingo Petch. Sigismund tried to retreat to Pluto's moons, only to discover that Alfarius had already taken over the largest of them, Hydra. When all seemed lost, Dawn returned with hundreds of ships, although most of them were nothing but escort vessels. Facing the prospect of a long and grinding battle, Dawn teleported onto Hydra to duel Alfarius. However, this was once again a trap laid by the traitor Primarch, and the teleport was hijacked to the sealed depths of Hydra. There awaited dying Archimus and Alfarius. The traitor wanted to talk. However, scared of being tricked for the 3rd time, Dawn relentlessly attacked. In a short duel, Dawn slew his brother. The last thoughts of Alfarius were grim. He had so much to tell: his true allegiance, the Zeno plot, an alternative plan of victory against the Chaos Gods, and the greater good of the galaxy. But now no one would know. In the aftermath of Alfarius' death, the traitors retreated, losing more than 100 ships. Dawn decided to keep his kinslaying secret. Soon the White Scars and the Space Wolves...
I mean, I don't blame him. Dawn had to make a choice, but I mean, if you're going to be a double agent against the Horus Heresy, for crying out loud, man, you gotta state something.
Arrived. All alternative assaults on Terra failed. With his supply lines secured, the War Master was now ready for his final offensive. Will he make it to Terra before the forces of Imperium Secundus break through the Ruinstorm? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we will catch you on the next one.
But will we catch you? Imperium's last line of defense. Beta Garment.
Only one barrier remains between Horus and the solar system. For thousands of years, the Garmin cluster served as a gateway to the cradle of humanity, and now its grandest trial lay before it. Loyalist forces rally from the entire galaxy in a desperate effort to bolster the last line of defense. War on such a scale will not be decided by humans or even space marines, but by thousands of titans and cunning primarchs. Welcome to our series on Warhammer 40k and the Horus Heresy, explaining the origins of the Imperium and Chaos. In this 12th video, we will explore the breach of the Ruinstorm and the Beta Garmin plotline. No doubt this will all be fuel for your own plotlines in universes near and far, and if you're going to be playing those out on the tabletop, we've got a deal for you from our sponsor Chepeku, who bring you their complete fantasy bundle. This is a chance for discounted access to Chepeku's massive library of tabletop fantasy gaming assets. It comes in 3 collections: maps, scenes, and tokens. The stunning maps can be used as static images, but also feature animation and sounds when used in virtual tabletop programs, all of which work with Chepeku assets. There are more than 6,000 maps in the archive already, including sci-fi maps by the way, so it's not only medieval-style fantasy Chepeku can help you with. The Scenes collection features backdrops to spice up gameplay events, with variations for different times, moods, or themes. Again, there are thousands to explore in there already. Tokens are a new system for easily portraying NPCs, monsters, or any actor in the world. There are loads of presets to use, you can customize them, or even generate tokens randomly for novel throwaway enemies and such. Every month, Chepeku adds 5 new maps, 5 new scenes, and more than 40 new tokens to these 3 already massive catalogues. They are normally sold separately, but now with their complete fantasy bundle offer, you need only pay for 2 to get all 3. It's also much cheaper than their previous Patreon subscription method, so even if you've tried Chepeku before, now's the perfect time for an update. Learn more and sign up at go.chepeku.com/wizards_warriors, link in the description. After the trial of Conrad Kurz, the Imperium Secundus was disbanded. Thereafter, its armies gathered in
Imperium Secundus fell apart because of what Gilliman found out Lion had done. And Sanguinus, who's his closest brother, cast out Lion. I just find it strange. Every time Gilliman and Sanguinius are with each other, there's always something bad that happens.
In order to reach Terra with utmost haste, garrisons and patrols were recalled, as every single man was needed. With Pharos weakened and damaged, finding an escape route off of Ultramar bordered on the impossible. To find the way out as fast as possible, the army split apart, with Lion using his Xeno device to break through. Even then, it took weeks to navigate out of the cradle of the Ruinstorm. The Ultramarines decided to make short, uncalculated warp jumps, hoping to eventually escape. Instead, they fell into an ambush of Wordbearers, World Eaters, and Night Lords. After a costly space battle, the traitors were defeated. Among the prisoners were Chaos Navigators, who agreed to guide the Loyalists out of the Ultramar. The Blood Angels dove headfirst into the fiercest part of the Ruinstorm, hoping that the true path would be obstructed the most. Suffering from demon incursions all over the fleet, the Armada was stuck in an endless battle. During lengthy combat, the Red Tier spotted a Chaos warship close to them and prompted the Legion to tail it. Sometime later, Sanguinius decided to translate out of the Immaterium. To the surprise of all 3 Primarchs, they had all ended up in the same place, the Pandarex system. Chaos clearly had an ulterior motive, otherwise only the Dark Angels would have left Ultramar. Yet the only way was forward. Lion was chosen as a guide, and the combined fleet departed. Twice more, Chaos tried to stop them, but twice it failed. At last they arrived at the border of the
it's 3
Ruinstorm,
Primarchs.
the Davin system.
They're not going to go down.
The Davin system was a graveyard of dreams. It was here that Horus had fallen, and with him, the bright future of the Imperium. All around lay destroyed ships, billions of human bones, and fragments of purged cities. These remains were but a fraction of hopeful futures ended by the Horus heresy. The pure chaos had brought them all here to the symbolic altar of unmaking. All Primarchs, including the captive Konrad Kurz, descended to the surface to find that the planet was completely abandoned. The expedition ventured into the Temple of the Serpent, where Horus had been corrupted, and found that it too was empty. Konrad's prophetic abilities augured that nothing would happen here, but Sanguinius was not convinced. Angel's proclamation that he would alter his grim future stirred the unholy powers of the temple. A portal was summoned, through which Sanguinius stepped. Chaos showed Sanguinius the manifestation of his deepest desires, yet this future was far too perfect, and thus bordered on the unbelievable. Consequently, Sanguinius easily dispelled the illusion to reveal Madial, the demon of chaos undivided. Madial offered Sanguinius a deal. Sanguinius would be given power and opportunity to kill Horus, but only if he would bend the knee. Meanwhile, a Chaos fleet appeared in orbit over Davin. This fleet was composed of all the ships that had been lost in the Ruinstorm and boarded by demon hordes. It was led by Madial's flagship, the bloated and enlarged cruiser called the Veritas Ferrum. The newly arrived armada matched the Loyalists. The fight was even, with each side suffering heavy casualties. Yet the demon infestation spread on every Loyalist ship that was destroyed. Superior tactics and skillful maneuvering were not enough to contain the ever-growing Chaos Armada. In an act of desperation, cyclonic torpedoes were fired. These were weapons designed to crack the planet's surface, yet Veritas Ferrum's bloated hull withstood the Exterminatus-grade impact.
Really?
Sanguinius, who, after teleportation was on board, used the tremors made by the torpedoes to escape back onto Davin. As soon as he was back on Davin, the Primarch orders the bombardment of cyclonic torpedoes on the temple. Madial tries to unsuccessfully pull Sanguinius back on the ship. Instead, a Blood Angel Space Marine held the demon in place halfway through the portal. All Loyalists, except for the heroic Blood Angels, evacuated off of the planet. The cyclonic torpedoes struck. Davin was destroyed, and the forces of planetary annihilation were transported through the portal.
So to be clear, the planet can't withstand them, even though they're designed specifically to crack the planet's surface, but a big-ass ship can withstand them. Come on, man.
Onto the Veritas Ferrum. It is unclear what the true reason for the Chaos flagship's end was: colossal brute force or the symbolic destruction of Davin. Either way, the demonic armada was banished as soon as their leader died. With the destruction of Davin, a path out of the Ruinstorm was created. It was the first of many that were created after that day. The Ruinstorm started dissipating, and forces of the late Imperium Secundus began searching for a way to reach Terra, finding that the only path available would take them through traitor lines. The Triumvirate decided that one of them should rush to Terra, while the others would occupy the traitor forces. Thus, Lion volunteered to attack traitor homeworlds to lure the enemy out. Guilliman attacked blockades head-on and pinned them in place, while Sanguinius arrived on Terra, taking Konrad Kurz with him. The Night Lord's Primarch had lost his faith in the inevitability of fate, and was ready to reconcile with his father. Sanguinius knew that the Emperor saw the Primarchs more as tools than sons, so there was a chance that Konrad would be forgiven. Not being able to stand this thought, he put Kurz in stasis and vented his coffin into deep space, where he would spend the next several decades until some unfortunate souls rescued him. Even with 4 legions in the solar system, its defenses were not strong enough. Since the start of the war, enough time had passed for the galaxy to mobilize. Tens of billions of soldiers, thousands of titans, and hordes of unimaginable might were on their way to Terra, either to defend or siege the cradle of humanity. If such armies were to fight on a single planet, nothing but ruins would remain. In order to prevent this, Dawn decided to bleed out both sides outside the solar system. The Garmin cluster would serve as the location for that bloodletting. Located on the junction of several major stable warp paths, this fortress system was to face the largest battle of the Horus heresy. Dawn gave orders to all Loyalist forces in the galaxy to muster there. Yet there was a second layer to Dawn's plan. The battle aimed to buy as much time as possible. There was no chance of victory. The only feasible achievement was stalling. With every passing day, Guilliman came closer. Leon burned another traitor planet, and Horus lost yet another part of his sanity. Leman Russ decided not to take part in a battle designed to be lost, but to throw himself into an insane operation that might yield a victory. Thus, he took it upon himself to defeat Horus before the Battle of Garmin Cluster could start. He told his soldiers of the dangers of the mission, and that they could remain on Terra, yet all elected to follow him to death. Russ took his legion towards his homeworld, Fenris, where he claimed further recruits, and steeled himself before his suicidal attack. Using the beacon planted on the Vengeful Spirit during the Battle of Molech, Russ located Horus in the Trisolian system. He mustered his entire legion in pursuit, which numbered 50,000 Space Marines and a fleet that was barely able to travel through the Immaterium after the damage sustained in the Alaxes Nebula. Against them stood the main traitor army, which consisted of the Sons of Horus, Word-Bearers, and Alpha Legion, with elements of the World Eaters, Iron Warriors, and Night Lords. In 012 M31, the Space Wolves arrived shortly after the system had surrendered. Local Mechanicum leadership was assassinated, and cyborg defenders were mind-controlled by a new Dark Mechanicum overlord. The traitor fleet dispersed to solidify control on all planets in the system. This gave the Space Wolves an opportunity for a sudden charge directly upon the War Master.
Question is, what is he going to be able
Even
to
with this perfect opportunity, the only way to kill Horus was with a boarding action, as the Loyalist fleet was in a sorry state. Approaching between 3 stars, the Space Wolves made contact before the traitors could regroup. Their entire tactic was to isolate the Vengeful Spirit, while the grand majority of the Legion boarded it. Yet the Vengeful Spirit was no longer just a ship. It had become a chaos domain of Horus. Its insides grew, its corridors became a changing labyrinth, and Horus could not be found unless he willed it. The Space Wolves attacked relentlessly. Their attack penetrated deep, just as the War Master intended. Trapped inside, far away from the landing decks, the Wolves became the prey. Horus dueled Leman. The War Master, with his new might, dominated Russ. In a last-ditch gamble, Leman sacrificed his arm, lung, and heart for a single strike. His spear pierced deep into Horus's side, and the chaos corruption was forced out of his body. Leman knew his brother well. After being liberated of chaos, Horus would see the madness of his actions and abandon his course. But after Molech, only half of Horus's soul was in his body, set apart from the burning ambition that willingly gave itself to chaos. The War Master summoned back the unholy powers and counterattacked. Mauled and defeated, Leman was at death's door. As Horus tried to finish him, the Space Wolves flocked to their Primarch, with hundreds dying to stop Horus, and thousands more perishing as they evacuated Leman out of the Vengeful Spirit.
Man.
Even outside the flagship, the fate of the Space Wolves was grim, for their fleet was about to be surrounded and destroyed. Luck, however, proved to be on their side when the Knights Errant blew up an ammunition depot on the Vengeful Spirit, enabling the Loyalists to regroup. Additionally, the young Mechanicum adept Belisarius Call killed the leader of the Trisolian Dark Mechanicum. It ended the mind control of all local forces, many of whom already were on board traitor ships. The Trisolian resistance bought precious time for the dying Space Wolves. Even with that much help, the Space Wolves barely managed to escape, losing more than 80% of their legion. Before falling into a coma, Leman Russ insisted that the operation was successful. Nevertheless, victorious or not, it was not the end of the struggle. The Space Wolves retreated into the Yarant system, and Abaddon chased after them. The Space Wolves had no chance of fighting back. Indeed, they would have all been utterly annihilated, if not for the intervention of the Raven Guard. Corvus Corax barely managed to evacuate his comatose brother, and escaped far away from Terra for Leman to heal undisturbed. While Abaddon was still occupied in Yarant, the injured War Master launched the offensive into the Garmin cluster. If the traitors could capture the planets Beta Garmin II and Beta Garmin III, the Loyalists would be forced to retreat. Horus's arrival in this solar system was so swift that no Loyalist Primarch had arrived yet. Moreover, the local Imperial army was disorganized, with Mechanicum forces from different planets refusing to cooperate or share their secret technologies. While the Loyalists struggled to organize themselves, Horus conquered Beta Garmin II. Taking the second main objective, Beta Garmin III, would take months of siege, so the War Master decided to expand the battlefield. he launched an offensive on roughly 100 planets, moons and space stations all around the Garmin cluster. The size of the armies was gargantuan, so much so that hundreds of Titans fought on each side on even secondary battlefields like the shipyards of Theta Garmin 5. When new Loyalist forces arrived upon this all-out war, they had nowhere to regroup before falling prey to a vigilant traitor fleet. On Beta Garmin 3, the opposing forces were locked in a stalemate when the Loyalists received intel that a new front was to be opened to the south. The defenders carved out a new unit under Princeps Escher Ani Mahana, sending all they could spare. In total, this force consisted of 50 Titans and 100 Knights. Additionally, they...
Man, just throwing Titans out there until there's none left. I'm sorry for that awesome piece of tech.
Contacted a newly arrived fleet that would reinforce them on site after breaking through the space blockade. Unfortunately, the Armada was intercepted, and all soldiers aboard were implanted with Dark Mechanicum mind-controlled chips. The ground forces observed as the promised reinforcements passed the blockade with practically no resistance. Mohana instantly understood that they were betrayed, and the incoming reinforcements were actually the traitor forces. Unleashing a barrage of surface-to-orbit fire, the Titans tried to scare off the fleet, but it was too late. The traitors retaliated with a bombardment before dropping 50,000 soldiers, manning artillery and tanks. The Titans were instantly surrounded and bombarded from above. The Loyalists charged towards the shore to escape encirclement. The Knights escaped along the coast, while the Titans went waist-deep into the water and fired upon the tanks with their flanks and backs now secured. The armored forces spread wide into a single line along the beach and exchanged fire with the Titans. Even now, the traitors' firepower was superior, and the Titans were falling one by one. Mohana ordered the Knights to return. The reinforcements started swiftly obliterating the flanks. The Dark Mechanicum Overlord struggled to reform, and as a consequence lost the entire army. With the ambush being unsuccessful, Beta Garmin 3 held until the arrival of forces from Terra. Before long, the Blood Angels and White Scars had arrived on the scene. Sanguinius assumed command and created order, while Jagatai struck at secondary battlefields, rapidly creating advantages and withdrawing before the traitors could respond. As the second year of the most bloody Battle of the Heresy started, Horus was on the back foot. Sanguinius was adamant about retaking Beta Garmin 2. The fortress city Nearcon and the orbital defense station above it, known as the Anvil, had to be retaken. Both sides gathered 2,000 Titans on the planet and tens of thousands of Astartes to fight aboard the station. The scale of destruction on the surface was unheard of. Only one word is used to describe this battle: Titan death. In orbit, the Sons of Horus fought to the last man, more like territorial beasts than tactical
Titans.
soldiers. Eventually, after weeks of fighting, it was discovered that the Anvil had been rigged to fall onto the city. The Blood Angels barely escaped, but the same could not be said for the Titans below. The entire city and space station fell on the Titans, both traitors and loyalists, with almost none on either side surviving. The fortress planet was now in loyalist hands, but its defenses lay completely in ruins. Beta Garmin 3 was left with a token garrison of 25 Titans, as severe acid rains covered the planet and corroded anything but the Titans in just a few days. However, Horus had spared 300 Titans in reserve and launched a successful counterattack on the planet. The positions of the two belligerents were now swapped. However, the traitors had more Titans left than the Loyalists did, and their core planet still had many intact fortresses. Sanguinius called for a general retreat. The war for Garmin Cluster was lost. However, the traitors' cheers were cut short, as Horus's wound from the combat with Lehman reopened, and the Warmaster fell into a coma. Would the traitor army be able to remain united with its leader out of commission? Or would a power vacuum destroy it from the inside? Find out in the next episode. Our series on the Warhammer 40k Horus Heresy will continue, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to learn about our...
Okay, that'll be it for today's stream, but I've just got to say, holy crap. Chaos is chaotic, but somehow organized. Weird. But they're doing no holds barred, using whatever they got means to win. While the Imperium is like, no orbital bombardments. This is my issue with this whole thing. Not a single instance did any of the Imperium orbital bombard the traitors down on the planets. They just went, we won't do it. But the traitors were like, orbital bombard the Imperium, and they just did. Like, come on. Vulcan got nuked. A nuke to the face. Tanked that motherfucker. Got back up, tortured, lost his mind, proceeded to get stabbed again after recovering by a divine artifact that can actually stop his perpetual regeneration, and then gets a vision from the Emperor, recovers by making a really overpowered hammer, and heads back towards Terra. Vulcan is ridiculous, really ridiculous. But still, man, the orbital bombardment thing, that's annoying me. That's annoying me. Imperium, come on. You just orbital bombard the traitors already. Oh my gosh. They just refuse to do it. Oh, that's annoying. All right. That'll be it for me, guys. See you next time.